Good evening and welcome to the December 6th, 2021 meeting of the City of Summit Zoning Board of Adjustment. My name is Stephen Spur and I am Chairman of the Summit Zoning Board. In accordance with New Jersey Statute 10:4-10, adequate notice of this meeting has been provided to a newspaper of record and has been posted here in City Hall. This meeting is a judicial proceeding. Any questions or comments must be limited to the issues that are relevant to what the board may legally consider in reaching a decision, and decorum appropriate to a judicial hearing must be maintained at all times. For the benefit of the interested public, this meeting is being live streamed to the city's YouTube page and also broadcast on Summit's government channel, which is Comcast Channel 34 and Verizon Channel 30. In close consultation with the City Clerk's Office, as well as careful consideration of relevant CDC and NJDOH guidance, the following precautions have been adopted to protect board members, professionals including city staff, applicants, members of the interested public, and others in consideration of ongoing public health concerns. First, all meeting attendees are required to wear a face mask, regardless of vaccination status, unless speaking as part of the formal proceedings. Second, social distancing is encouraged wherever practical. Third, face masks and hand sanitizer are available for attendees to use at the meeting room entrance. And fourth, regular and rigorous cleaning of the facilities has been conducted by city staff. Please note that fire exits are to my right, your left, and at the back of the room where you entered. The city has a listening system to assist the hearing impaired. If anyone needs hearing assistance, please obtain the system at the dais and return it thereafter. Andy Ball is the zoning board's attorney. He will advise the board members on matters of law and is the key interface with an applicant's attorney. Mr. Ball does not vote on the applications. Chris Nicola is a city employee and is the zoning board secretary. Mr. Nicola works with the applicants on preparing their applications, planning our agendas, and keeping our meeting minutes. Mr. Nicola also does not vote on the applications. Our board consists of 7 regular members and up to 4 alternates. All members can participate in the hearings tonight, but a maximum of 7 can vote. Most applications require a simple majority to be approved. Some applications require 5 affirmative votes to be approved. You'll be told which majority will be required before we begin our deliberations. Mr. Nicola, will you please call the roll of the members?
Sure. Chairman Spur?
Here.
Vice Chairwoman Newell is excused. Mr. Yuko?
Here.
Mr. Steiner? Mr. Maud?
Here.
Schwartzstein?
Here.
Mr. Millay is excused. Mr. Leukitz?
Here.
Ms. Toth?
Here.
Ms. Sager?
Here.
And Dr. Levine.
Here.
All right, you have a quorum. You can proceed.
Okay. We generally hear the cases in the order they are listed on the agenda. We try to have each hearing last no more than 30 minutes, but we do understand that some cases are too complex to be heard within that time frame. Each hearing begins with the applicant or their attorney giving an overview of the application and the variances that are required. We then hear from any expert witnesses the applicant may have to help explain the application and why the variances are needed. The board members may ask questions of the applicant, their attorney, and the expert witnesses. Once the board members and the board professionals have completed their questioning, the public will have an opportunity to ask questions. This is not the time to tell us what you think about this case. That opportunity comes at the end of the hearing. Before you ask your questions, please clearly state your name, spell your last name, and provide your address. It is important that our court reporter be able to keep a clear and accurate public record. And just to note, stenography is being conducted through the video system, so when you do come to speak, it is important you speak either here at the lectern through the microphone or at the table, just so we can get a clear record. After all witnesses have been heard, members of the audience have their second opportunity to speak, and at that time you may express your opinion, positive or negative, about the application. Then the public hearing is closed, and we then enter into executive session where the board members discuss the case and vote. You'll be able to listen to our executive session, but you will normally not be able to participate in our discussion. Most applications are heard and decided in the same evening. If a case requires additional testimony or information that cannot be presented tonight, we will carry your case to another date and it will not be decided during this meeting. Krista Anderson, the city's zoning officer, has asked that I remind all applicants that they must read carefully the resolution that documents the zoning board's decision and to pay particular attention to the conditions contained in the resolution. For example, if a landscaping plan is required, you must obtain one and submit it to John Linson, the city's forester. If a grading plan is required, you must have one prepared by a civil engineer and submit 3 copies along with the application fee to the city's engineering division. Failure to satisfy all conditions in a resolution will result in a delay in approving your application, as it will cause extra work for city zoning staff. The resolutions documenting the board's decision will normally be available 1 month after we decide the case. When I call your name, please tell me how many witnesses you have and whether you think you can complete your case in 30 minutes. First on the agenda tonight is Sachin Dev, 133 Beekman Road. Sachin, would you just mind just come up here for a quick second? Good evening. Do you have an attorney with you this evening?
No, I don't.
Okay. Any professionals with you?
Yes, I do have my architect with me.
Excellent. All right. She'll be doing all the heavy lifting for you then. So you
Definitely.
think about, we're going to just hear through the other two real quick. Do you think 30 minutes or so should be adequate?
Yeah, definitely.
Excellent. Thank you very much. Next on the agenda will be Steve and Catherine Orr, 35 Whitridge Road. You can sit if you like. Yeah, it's fine. Hello.
How are you?
Good evening. Do you have an attorney with you this evening?
I do not.
Okay. Any professionals?
We have Dave Rosen.
Oh, hello, Mr. Rosen. Okay. And Mr. Rosen, you think it'll be 30 minutes tonight? Less. All right. Good answer so far. All right, we'll hear you second this evening. Thank you very much. And then finally, 503 Springfield Avenue Associates. I doubt this will be less than 30 minutes, but Ms. Alfonso, what do you think?
I would say about an hour.
Okay, and for professionals, I see a whole row of folks back there.
We do. We have an architect, engineer, and planner.
Okay, wonderful. You'll be heard third. Thank you very much. Okay, Mr. Dev, hello.
Hi.
We're going to swear you in, and then we'll offer you the opportunity just to briefly introduce yourself.
If you could please raise your right hand. Do you swear affirm that the testimony you're about to give in this matter is the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
Yes.
And please state your name, spell your last name.
My name is Sachin Dev. Last name is D-E-V.
Thank you.
Do you think is that your wife back there?
Yes.
Do you think she'll be testifying, or you got this under control?
If I think it'll be better if she does.
No, it's okay.
If things go wrong, I'll put her in.
It's okay.
I told her it'll be better you present.
No trouble. If you do need to speak, we'll just have to swear you in, but otherwise we'll put the limelight on him to begin. So you can just introduce the case, and then we can have your architects continue.
Okay, definitely.
you.
So we live in Summit at 133 Beekman Road. What we're proposing is we're trying to get an extension on the second floor, and we need a side yard setback of about 3 feet because the property is a 60 feet width property in an R15 zone, and so I think there's a 15 feet setback required, and so my architect will explain this better than me. Okay.
Anything else you'd like to say? Otherwise, just want to offer the board the opportunity to ask any questions of you as the applicant.
Are there any questions? But overall, I think for us, one of the main reasons we are doing this is because the second floor, basically we have a flat roof there, and we needed, there are two problems. One is because of COVID, we need an additional study room because I work from home. I used to work in the city, and my wife works from home a lot of times. So we need to get an extension to put up a study. And the second part is, the second reason why we need to do that is because of the flat roof. What's happening is when it snows a lot, we've got a leak because of the flat roof system. So essentially what we're doing now is, since we cannot be shoveling snow from on the second floor and be doing it every time it snows, we're thinking we're just going to replace it with a room there with an extension.
Okay.
And Malti will go through the details of how we're going to do
Perfect.
that.
Thank you.
Any questions?
Any questions from members of the board, the applicants? Well, I assume our professionals will want to hear perhaps from the architect first. So, excellent. Thank you very much. We'll swear you in.
Do you swear affirm that the testimony you're about to give in this matter is the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
I do.
And please state your name, spell your last name.
Malathi Ananthakrishnan, ANANTHAKRISHNAN.
Thank you. And can you briefly describe your background, experience, and 3 boards you've recently appeared before?
Sure. I'm a registered architect in the states of New Jersey, New York, and Pennsylvania. I've been practicing on my own for the last 17 years. I do a lot of residential work, and I have testified in most of central Jersey. And I myself sit on the zoning board in New Providence.
Thank you. Any questions from the board, or would you like to accept your credentials at this point?
Accept your credentials, particularly because of your new Providence qualification.
Yeah,
That's
if I
very
can
neat.
get to my board at 8 o'clock, that'll be perfect.
We'll try. You can proceed.
All right. It's a simple project. We have an existing 2-story house. And the rear section, there's one section which has a balcony, as you can see out here. And that area, which is a balcony right now, we want to convert into a living habitable space. And the area shaded, which I submitted on the drawings, that is the triangle that we need the setback for. And the same thing has been shown on this photograph, which we submitted. This section in the back, so there's a sliver, a trapezoidal sliver where you need the variance. There will be a first floor addition as well, but that is all conforming. I mean, that's it. That's the case. But I think I do have to address some of the questions the planner had for me.
Sure.
That's it. All right, I think the Collier's Engineering and Design, point number 7, it says, we know the applicant did not provide existing and proposed coverage information. Oops, one second. So the existing ground coverage is 1875 square feet, which makes it only 7.66%, while 35% is allowed, and we are going up to 9.96, so well within the maximum allowed. Point number 8 says on the application we had 2,126 square feet for the total area on the plot. That was erroneous. That was the 2,126 is both floors together. So the 1,326 square feet is correct. The point number 9 and 10, the planner had done the calculations, and for the same thing for the impervious coverage, and we are acceptable of those. And since the ground coverage exceeds 300 square feet, we will provide stormwater dry well when we submit for building permits. Number 11, the applicant has shown there's a parking area noted on the right of the garage. So you asked for what it was and what the coverage is. So I'd like to submit exhibit, what number should I put?
Call this A1.
I think we might have to share. We don't have enough.
That's okay, we can share. I'll share, you can pass those down. Yeah, I'll share, that's fine. Yep.
So this one,
Just take a peek at it real quick.
Thank you.
so this one is basically what we've done is we've put some stones there, mainly because our house has a pretty huge gradient.
Can you just tell us when this photo was taken? Just
No, to this morning.
this morning, okay.
Yeah. It looks pretty bad because the gravel is really not is not the best. I think frankly we do need to take some permission and put a proper pavement there. So the main reason why is in winter what happens is since the slope is pretty high. On the driveway, whenever we park on the thing and my wife forgets to put the parking brakes, the car goes onto the street. It has happened twice. So what we do, so I'm pretty cautious. So in winter, what I do is I make sure she goes and parks it there so that it doesn't slide back or we don't have any emergency issues. So it's happened twice. So what we've done is we put some stones there. It's not concreted or anything. It's just stones that we put there.
It's still pervious. It is instead of grass, they've got some gravel.
Yeah, exactly.
But it's a question that came up on the planners. Number 12, we hadn't noted the location of a proposed AC unit. There will be one more condenser unit, and we'll put it conforming right behind the kitchen, and we will leave more than 10 feet side yard setback. I'm sure Chris will note it when I submit for building permits. The last one was, they asked us whether we propose to remove any trees. We do not, as anything that's on the first floor addition is not close to any existing trees. And on the second floor addition, if required, we will trim some limbs, but our intention is not to remove any trees. The other points, 14, 15, 16, were all instructions. They were not questions for me. So I
Just
don't know.
while we're on the subject of the engineering letter, anything else you'd like to call out, Mr. Dower?
Well, the only thing I would say is that if they want to include that area where the parking is off to the side, whether it's gravel or paved, it still is considered impervious by the city.
Okay.
So that should be added to the calculations and then also into the design of the stormwater system.
Okay, we can do that.
Is not the width of that in excess, do we have any idea what the width of this thing is? And
No.
because the driveway has a width limit,
Right.
What is that? How is that? This does not appear to be complete.
Okay, so it would have to be conforming.
Okay. Yeah, the driveway is pretty steep, so we wouldn't be increasing the curb cut. This is right at the top.
The width, it's only allowed to be so wide.
18 feet,
This
right?
looks like you've doubled it, which
No, it-
looks, and I need accurate measurements.
Absolutely.
That's gonna have to be, I don't know if it's gonna be next year's meeting or if it's gonna be a condition.
Yeah, I don't know if you'd be able to provide the detail that the board's necessary, would be able to like calculate the impact on the driveway width tonight. So I think what we would ask you to do is to proceed in whatever manner you can to conform with what is allowed through the DRO. And then understanding that if you need to seek permission in excess of the DRO, you'll find yourself back here for that need. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
It's
Okay.
a one-car driveway right now, so we will confirm it. I believe it's 18 feet, the maximum, so we will
I'm
confirm.
having a very difficult time hearing you through the mask and everything.
I'm
else.
sorry, I can take that off. Right now, it's a one-car width driveway. So at the top of the driveway near the car garage, we'll make sure that we stay within the maximum allowed for a driveway in that zone.
It looks like you're exceeding it now.
If it exceeds
That's
right
a
now,
car
we
and
will.
a half, and you can barely have a two-car driveway.
So I'm looking at the ordinance now, and
Okay.
for R15 zones, it looks like it's a single driveway is permitted not to exceed 12 feet in width, and having a curb opening not to exceed 15 feet in width,
Mhm.
driveway apron not to exceed 12 feet in width.
So this is clearly
Yeah, so this would,
non-conforming.
We can grass it out.
This gotta go.
The other thing, if I can add, is that the setback from the side yard has got to be more than 2 feet per the ordinance. So
But, yeah.
that would have to comply as well.
I think the takeaway is it's more involved than us unfortunately just ballparking it this evening.
Yeah.
If you want to speak to, a driveway paver, someone who may have a creative solution to, this particular driveway that sounds pretty unique. I can't say I actually went there with an eye for the slope of the driveway necessarily. But, we would obviously, as there's a public safety interest in addressing this, if the car is in fact sliding into the roadway, I think you would find the board relatively favorable to, a variance in this respect. We just need more detail to it.
Okay, we can do that.
So, yeah, I think if you look at it, yourself initially, and then if you need to return back to the board, we'd be happy to find
You know
time.
what, I'll work with Chris, we'll figure out what the setbacks are and all the details. Chris has been really helpful
Yeah.
for us, so.
To get a sense.
I'll look through the details, and if we need to come back to the board for that variance, we'll come back. If we decide to confirm, we'll just confirm.
Okay, that'd be wonderful.
Either
Thank
way.
you. Yeah, no,
I'll let Chris know, and then we'll map out. the plan.
Chris is very helpful. We'd be happy to
He has
chat
been,
with
he
you.
has been incredibly helpful.
We're very lucky to have him, that's right. And just to note on the engineer's letter, typically we condition any application on the acceptance of the terms. So pretty much everything that we've discussed, we would just include it as one condition that you'll accept and conform with the conditions noted in the engineer's letter. Is that acceptable, Mr. Dow?
Oh, I didn't know.
yeah.
Yeah,
Yes.
okay. I thought it was too technical for me, but that's fine.
Just nod along, you'll do fine. No, so that's great. And then with respect to the screening, that was a question that I had. So I understand that you don't intend to add any screening or remove any trees. Did you have a chance to speak to Mr. Linson, the forester, about his recommendation to remove the large white pine on the west side of the structure?
I saw that. We weren't planning.
We've not decided on that. We were thinking, we can take his advice and we can talk to him.
It was a suggestion. Typically, if it's important to him, he'll offer a little bit more pointed language. So I just didn't know if you
I
had
did
more
see
information for us.
it, but we'll work on it then.
Okay.
I'll talk to him and see what his recommendation is.
Okay. I don't, and this is my opinion, and if anyone has any other questions, but I don't know if this calls out for a full-scale landscaping plan. I don't think so. Perhaps some additional screening, but I don't know if anyone feels
There's a
differently.
whole row of arborvitae on the left
Yeah.
side.
Oh, yeah, the screenings, we've got a whole
Is adequate,
5,
yeah,
6,
for sure.
not even,
Yeah.
we have 8 arborvitaes, but this one towers over up everything. So we can trim the branches.
Yeah. I think the recommendation here, the takeaway should be at least to maintain the existing level of screening, if not seek to improve it. I don't necessarily feel a need to condition the application on additional screening.
Should we try to anticipate, what if they do decide to remove the tree? Should we try to anticipate what we would want them to do if they do that? Can we?
I wonder how you.
Oh, I can plant trees. I'm a big If you see this picture of the AC, how presented, this is.
Is this a new exhibit,
Or
another
I need
picture?
to, I
Oh,
need
you need
to.
to write.
That's okay, yeah. Sorry.
So there's a big row of arborvitaes which protect it. Actually, that's the only tree which doesn't have as much screening, but it's like
Okay.
a 100-year-old tree, you know?
Is it too subjective to condition this on the maintenance of the equivalent existing screening, something to that effect?
It's always better to have as much detail as
Yeah.
possible.
Yeah.
So if there's anything in particular that you do want to require, we should probably get that noted.
Does anyone want to see the white pine removed? No?
No.
No, I don't think so, right? Okay, that's the
No.
first portion of it. Does anyone feel a need to condition additional screening for the application?
So there's a row of arborvitaes, as you see, which is completely screening the neighborhood, you know?
What do you think, Tom?
I'm okay with it, the way it is. Yeah.
I don't think we'll add an additional condition. We would just ask that you be sensitive to, in the course of construction, if the white pine, if the arborvitae, if for whatever reason the screening that exists today is substantially changed, that you take steps to plant new or whatever that might be to maintain the privacy that exists.
Definitely, we have a very good relationship with the neighbor there,
Okay.
who's where we're building, so I'll talk to them. We
Okay.
basically make sure that they're happy, you know?
Okay. That's
So
fine.
definitely.
Okay, wonderful. Anything else you'd like to add? Otherwise, I'll open it for some additional questions.
No, thank you for your time.
Yeah.
So we heard from Mr. Dower. I think you're okay. Anything further you'd like to note? Okay, thank you. Any questions from members of the board? Claire, okay.
Well, I'll just start by saying I really appreciated the way the drawings, the plans, and the photographs marked the area for which you're seeking a variance. So it made it really simple. The property to your left as you're standing in the street is almost a full story lower than yours. And I was wondering if the addition was going to affect the way the light reaches your next door neighbor. On Saturday morning in December, the light was coming from the other direction, so I'm incapable of judging the time of day, the time of year, but I was a little concerned about whether you'd be blocking the neighbor.
I don't think so. I mean, obviously, I think since the arborvitaes are towering up there, so literally they go pretty high, which acts as a screener. With this house, with this addition coming up, on the right side, there's already a building there. So if you see the picture, it's only the 3 feet extension variance, which is the 3 feet additional. I don't think so. It may cause a lot of problems in terms of sunlight. But I cannot vouch for it.
Right.
You know, that's the thing. But I did speak to Agnes. She's our neighbor. Paul and Agnes were very nice couples, and they were comfortable with it. They were okay with it.
Okay, good, thank you.
Actually, I wanted to get his son here just to make sure, but I didn't want to go disturb him in the rain.
That's okay. No, sometimes neighbors not appearing sends a good signal,
Yeah.
so that's okay. Thank you. Any other questions from members of the board this evening? I'll pause as well to offer any members of the interested public the opportunity to ask any questions. I don't believe there's any member of the interested public for this application, so with that, I believe the architect was your only witness. Anything you'd like to say in closing?
No, I'd just like to thank everyone for this, and special thanks to Chris, because I went back and forth multiple times with him, and he used to be very responsive in his emails. Even this morning, I'm like, hey, I couldn't find the zoning board application, so he was really helpful. So thanks to Chris, though.
You're very welcome. We would also typically offer the members of the interested public the opportunity to offer their opinion in favor or in opposition. Seeing no members of the interested public here, Andy, what conditions do we have for the application?
So I have 2. First is our usual compliance with the conditions noted in the board engineer's memorandum. And I did hear, and I think it's probably worth calling out, although I think it's noted in that memorandum, that as a second condition, the applicant will submit the stormwater management plan to include the addition of the dry well to the city engineer for review and approval.
Excellent. Who'd like to begin deliberations?
Way we can add something to get this driveway corrected. That they can't proceed unless the driveway is
Well, they have to ensure the driveway is compliant, because they're not getting any variance relief for the driveway through this application. So it would,
we normally, this goes back a few years, but when we get a case like this, it has been our previous position that we make it whole. We make sure that everything is accurate and everything is the way it should be. If we pass this, this driveway remains. If it's gonna be there, and then who knows when it's gonna happen, we're then relying on enforcement to maybe pick it up. I think it's our responsibility to pick it up and by condition or by somehow get this driveway to be 15 feet or 12 feet or whatever it is, or table it and come back with with a request for a variance for the driveway to be what they, for safety reasons or whatever they can prove, which they have not done to my view, that they need. And I will not be able
I
to
think the
support
two-
this application in its current
I
state.
understand. I think the two challenges, at least that I foresee, and I agree with you, we do want to address nonconformities like this driveway extension. The two issues you have is, I don't believe we have the sufficient detail to understand encroachments into setbacks, this approximate square footage of what's being requested, what the final design of this additional, I have an approximation, you and I could figure it out, right? There's a lot of stuff in this
missing in this application.
I also think, and my question to Chris would be, when could we get them back onto a hearing?
Maybe reorg, January, we could
Right.
squeeze it in.
Yeah. So I would, and they would probably prefer to proceed with this request, which in a sense is disconnected, it's the same property, yes, but disconnected. I understand, Joe, if you can't support the application out of the interest of seeing every issue addressed, but I think they need to spend time back with even an engineer to understand what's the best path forward for this separate
Agreed,
portion.
and, but it's a package.
So just so we address it tonight, could we add a condition that says they're either going to remove that gravel area or they're going to come back for a variance, one or the other?
we could, if the board would like to see that as a condition, that
If you would add it as a condition that it is, that the driveway will be made conforming to whatever the language of the ordinance is, and then if they have to, they can always come back for a second variance,
Exactly.
That's,
which means they go through the same process again.
That makes sense, that makes sense.
we'll
I
note
think
that as a third condition.
we'll
then.
assume now, we'll make, like Steven said, we'll make it separate, and if we need to come back, we'll try to confirm. Not, we will confirm. If we don't confirm, we'll come back for a variance.
Yeah, no, I'm
For
just,
another.
Joe, and not to cause any more problems than I need to for my meeting, is, I'm concerned that compelling them to return this driveway to a conforming position in the middle of winter is going to exacerbate an unsafe condition.
No, I'm not saying that they have to do it, they're not gonna do the whole project.
But-
It's gonna be part of the process that they're gonna do, which, I mean, I don't think they're planning to
So
build.
can we specify in the condition that they would bring it into conformance
Within the time frame.
within 6 months, a year, I don't know, whatever the
That's fair.
appropriate
The
timeframe
building
is.
permit.
Yeah,
Well,
that's right.
and
I just don't
building
want
permit
this
unless it
car
has a plan.
sliding into the street in the middle of the winter. I don't want
I don't want them to do it
I
tomorrow.
don't live there, but I don't want it.
I don't want them to do it tomorrow.
Okay.
So do we have a particular time frame that we're interested in seeing here?
I mean, I'm comfortable with it.
Before certificate of occupancy,
Okay.
Yeah,
Okay.
does that work?
Is that acceptable?
Yeah, that's
Okay.
perfectly fair.
Does that work for everybody? Because then we know we've gotten it taken care of sooner or later.
That's fine. That's great. Thanks, Joe. All right.
Thank you.
Does that make
Now
sense? Do you
I'll- Oh,
understand?
yeah,
Okay.
Now I'll
Very
change my
reasonable.
position.
That's very reasonable for me. I thought you were going to make me comply now in my winter. I have 3 cars slide out.
Yeah, I'd rather you not say
Now I'll
that,
change
right?
my position to approving the idea of what they've asked for in the beginning. Makes all the sense in the world.
You understand it's important that we bring any non-conforming conditions into conformity.
Oh,
So
no,
we
definitely.
suspect this will take a little bit more of a back and forth with an engineer, but do it right. We're going to give you the opportunity though to go forward with the rest of the application.
Perfect.
Okay.
Thank you very
Joe.
much.
You're very welcome. Any other comments further to Joe's or?
Yeah, I mean, just note that the left side yard setback is there, they're just making it higher, and I think Mr. Spur made a point that the fact that the neighbor's not here shows that they're probably not too concerned about it. The addition's in the rear, so there's no impact to the neighborhood other than the side neighbor. So I don't see any negative impacts on the neighborhood. So I could support it. It's an attractive improvement of the house.
Thank you.
Anyone else care to add anything? No? Yes? I too could support the application and appreciate the length that you're willing to undertake to minimize the impact on your neighbors, allow it to conform, with the characteristics of the neighborhood. And with that, I would entertain a motion to approve, unless, Joe, you have anything else you want to add to this application?
We're having a quick conference here,
I
but it's
see
okay,
that.
go ahead.
Okay, all right, entertain a motion to approve the
I'll
application.
move to approve.
Thank you, Diana. A second?
Second.
All right, Scott. Chris, you give us a roll call?
Sure. Mr. Yuko?
Yes.
Mr. Steiner?
Yes.
Mr. Mullen?
Yes.
Ms. Schwartzstein?
Yes.
Mr. Loikitz?
Yes.
Ms. Toth?
Yes.
And Chairman Spur.
Yes. All right, thank you very much.
Thank you very much.
Yep. All right, next up is Steve and Catherine Orr, 35 Whitridge. For the record, I will be recusing, Dr. Levine will be recusing. You are under the whims of Mr. Yuko. Good luck to you all. Deja vu all over. That's right.
Hey, Sam? Can you just move your tablet for Dave? Thank you.
Somebody else using it, so.
He just set it on.
Do you need the HDMI?
Yeah, I'm gonna connect it. I think that's fine.
There we go. Applicant ready?
I'll be right there.
Are you ready?
Oh, I'm ready.
Okay. So Steve and Catherine Orr, 35 Whitridge. Presume you're Catherine Orr?
I'm Catherine, yep.
Okay.
Hi.
If you could please raise your right hand. Do you swear or affirm that the testimony you're about to give in this matter is the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
I do.
And please state your name, spell your last name.
Catherine Orr, last name is spelled O-R-R.
Thank you.
Sure.
Okay, so we'll let your architect do the heavy lifting, as Steve says. But
Definitely.
if you can give us a brief introduction of what you're planning to do, and
Sure.
then Mr. Rosen can take over.
Sure. Good evening. I'm Katie Orr, is what I go by. My husband Steve is here as well. Our family, we live at 35 Whitridge in Summit. We moved in a few years ago. We were previously in the city, but I grew up in Summit, and I convinced Steve that we needed to move back here because it's a great place to raise a family. And so we moved into our home a few years ago, and we've worked really closely with Dave and his team to do some renovations to the interior. This past fall, we did some landscaping work, and we added dry wells in our backyard to address some water issues that we had. And now we'd like to move on to the next phase of our project, which is addressing our back deck. It's an amazing space that's off of our family room and our kitchen, and we use it all the time for entertaining, but unfortunately, it's just on its last legs and really could use some TLC. So we have spent some time with Dave and his team designing something that we think is really beautiful and something that we would use a lot. But unfortunately, because our home is very tall to begin with, and also because our property slopes downhill, we're coming across some restrictions from a height perspective, which is why we're here tonight. So I'll turn it over to Dave to walk through it in much better detail than I personally could, but if you have any questions for me before we do so, I'd be more than happy to address them.
Any questions for the applicant before we hear from the architect? Okay, seeing none?
No?
Mr. Rosen?
All right, thank you.
All right, do you swear or affirm that the testimony you're about to give in this matter is the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
Yes, I
And
do.
please state your name, spell your last name.
Dave Rosen, R-O-S-E-N. I'm a partner in Rosen Kelly Conway Architecture and Design in Summit.
And I know you've appeared before us
Yes.
plenty of times
Yes.
before. Any changes since the last time you appeared before the board?
Everything's good.
All right.
changes.
Thank you.
Okay, you can see, I'll go through, I just want to show you a couple of pictures first, and then I'll just go through. We're here for 2 variances for height. And as you can see, the house is quite tall. We are not changing anything in the attic or the 3rd floor or the 2nd floor or really on the 1st floor. It is this deck that we are replacing. And in doing so, we're going to have a slightly bigger deck A stair comes off to this side toward the driveway. There will be a stair to the other side as well. And the deck will come out a little bit farther to the back. In doing that, it's a little hard to see at this scale, but the ground drops off slightly. So we have two variances that are related to the height of the existing building, but since that's measured from the ridge down to the ground, or the other way, but in this case, the part that's unchanged is the ridge. With the ground level being a little bit lower, we have 0.3 feet, so about 4 inches difference in the average height of the house. That is from the ridge down to the average ground level around the perimeter. And then at its greatest point, it's 1.1 feet, so about 13 inches. And that is just in the area around the deck because the property slopes down a bit. And this is, as a tall house, and with the deck on the first floor, we wanted to make a patio space in the basement rather than having that wall of lattice that surrounds it now. When we look at the current deck, there is, let me just give you the whole thing. I took a panorama of this. So a panorama is always distorted because I've moved around. But if we blow this up a little bit and start on one side, if we start on the left side. So we're looking out the back of the house. All the way to the left is the chimney. And as you can see, there are a whole lot of plants on the adjacent neighbor's yard. This is the Massiosi's carriage house. You can't even really, their house is back here somewhere, but it's hard to see. And then as we move around, these retaining walls are on the next neighbor's property. That's the Malicks on Essex. And their property actually comes, there's a line where the end of the lawn is, sort of hidden behind here. That's the back of their property. They've been particularly nice in doing a beautiful landscaping job for the Orr's benefit. Then, as we pivot around, then we see the Lippers carriage house, and then there's another garage for the next door neighbor. There are almost no houses visible, so this deck does not really adversely impact anybody else, so that often if a house has a deck that's really sort of coming off of, let me make that a little bigger, coming off of the back of the house at a full story above the ground, sometimes that can have an impact on somebody else. Sometimes it can look down into somebody else's property or just cause some kind of concern for a neighbor. In this case, none of the neighbors can really see it that easily, and from this deck, or certainly from the patio, about the only thing that's visible is the neighbor's landscaping or carriage houses. So that's really the main piece on here. And I just want to go through some of the statistics on it. So the existing house, I'll do it in the order that Krista does it. The average building height will be 44.1 feet. Now, only 38 feet is permitted, but again, that's the existing condition, and we are raising that by the proposed is 44.1, which is 0.3, or about 4 inches higher than the 43.8. Sorry for these numbers. But the point is that it gets the average ground level to the ridge changes by that 4 inches. As for the whole property, the existing is 46.5. The proposed is 1.1 feet more than that, so 47.6. And for that, 43 feet is permitted. So you're allowed to have a higher structure from the very highest point to the very lowest. But in this case, because of the height of the house and the way that it was originally designed, and because the property slopes down into the back, we need variances for both of those. Now, with regard to stormwater management, as Katie mentioned, they put in dry wells. There are two sets of dry wells. One is in the backyard, which is sort of somewhere under the lawn under here, because when it rains, as we could see from the other photos, you can see that the other houses are up higher. And so when this, let me get a little bit bigger. All of the other houses, the property, the ground level is up here. For the Masiossi's backyard, it's actually at this level, and the Malik's is up here, and so on. And so the water flows into this yard. So the dry wells were put in to contain the stormwater, not just for this property, but also what naturally flows to this property. So it doesn't cause any problems in any way for any other neighbors, not with light, not in terms of sight, any of those things. Krista had a couple of comments, but I'm just, and I'll address those and the engineering, but I just want to see if anybody has any questions. I'm glad to go through the drawings. I'd be glad to show those, but I assume you've looked at those.
Anybody want to hear more about the architectural drawings?
I have a quick question.
Yes.
I mean, you said you're expanding the size of the deck, you're just replacing it essentially though, like the height that it's at now.
Will be the same.
Okay.
Yes, the deck surface will be the same level that it is now.
Right.
And the difference is that we're putting a patio down and going out just a little farther, and it just goes down a little bit.
Right.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
Okay,
Anybody
well,
else, more
if-
questions?
If we're going to ask fast questions, if this were a
Yes.
level lot, would we be here?
Well, you would always be here, but if it was a level lot, we probably would anyway, because it already exceeds, and that would be an expansion of an existing nonconformance. So yes, we would all be here anyway. But it doesn't adversely impose. The way that this house is perceived from the street is absolutely unchanged. And when I went through these photos, looking around, you can't even see the adjoining property, the houses on the next lot, because this is all screened and it's farther forward, and just coming around, this is their carriage house, but their house is even farther over.
Speaking of screening, are you going to address Chris Anderson's comment about screening the parking area?
Yes, that's actually has partially been done. I'm gonna increase the size of this so the bushes look bigger. There are a number of plants that have gone in. There is more coming. They have a tree that is going in here. 2 trees were removed in this area, near the parking area. These are skip laurels, which will grow fairly large fairly quickly, and so they will obscure at least part of this area. If there's a condition to add more, we will do so.
I think I'd like to see that addressed, just so we show that we took her comment seriously, and I can see that they're starting screening, but that looks like it's going to take a while to be meaningful, so we can add some kind of suggestion.
So normally our condition would be for a landscaping plan to be submitted for review and approval by the city forester.
And the forester's okay with what's there?
Yeah.
That's the thing here.
So,
The forester has actually already approved, I believe, the plan that Krista identifies of June 24th of this year was when the landscaping and the site changes were done. So the reason that the Environmental Commission mentions the loss of a couple trees, 2 or 3 trees, 2 were in the front, just sort of in the area, like in here, and there is one tree. One tree was removed that was sort of right next to the deck. The Environmental Commission mentions that, but John Linson has no objections, no comments, because he has already reviewed this.
So I would like to see something done to fill in that a little bit more quicker than it looks like it'll grow naturally. I don't know how closely you could space these together. Do you have a suggestion to what you could do to make it denser quicker?
Sure. This so we actually plan on planting a larger tree there too, which should help, but we had a problem sourcing it because there's issues with sourcing everything nowadays, but with trees, when we were doing our planting, it was a problem. So we're definitely doing that in the spring. And we have been told those skip laurels, I mean, we've been told that they grow pretty fast, and we purposely planted skip laurels there instead of boxwood or something like that because we know that it grows larger in size and scale. So, I don't know if you have anything to add, but. The one tree is the sycamore that we want to plant. But, I mean, we're happy if it would make everyone more comfortable if we were to add a little bit more landscaping, that's not a problem. We would be happy to address it.
When were the skip laurels put in?
We just planted them.
So, they grow.
They do?
I mean, this was just done a few months ago.
They'll go up and out, so, I mean.
Yeah, these bushes will join.
Okay, I'll.
Based on what we see
They
there.
can get to be like 7 feet tall.
Yeah, all right, I'm hearing I'm hearing comments from board members that maybe my lack of knowledge of how fast those plants are gonna grow.
Yeah, those are skip laurels right there, very old skip laurels, but, I mean, they can get huge,
But
so.
within a couple years, they'll look like that?
No, probably not, but they
Okay.
would get much larger.
Much bigger.
Yes.
All right, then
How
I'm,
fast is fast? I'm just curious, I don't know anything
A
about
few
this.
years. Give them like 3 years, they'll probably go up a few feet.
I'm comfortable with that then, unless anybody else feels stronger. Okay.
Just to continue with Krista's comments, she asked that we identify that there's a porch, there's an existing porch on part of the property that's in this view, not in this view, but it's on the left side of the house in this. Let me just go to, in here on the floor plan, this room does not have basement underneath it. She was just commenting on that in doing her calculations about floor area ratio. The basement already counts as a story, so we're not adding a story. And all of the floor area in the basement already counts in the floor area ratio statistic. So she just wanted confirmation in the testimony in her second to last paragraph that there is no basement under there, and that's correct. Okay, I think that the only other comment was one by the engineer in number 12, again about the stormwater improvements. Just wanted the applicant shall confirm in testimony that these either will be there or are there. They already are there. And I think that that's all of the issues that the staff has brought up, other than the Environmental Commission, which asked that additional trees be planted, and that has already been, that's already approved under the site improvements that were from June 24th, 2021. Those were already approved. Are there any questions on any of this?
Sir, Mr. Dara, anything you want to add?
No, they've really covered everything. I think the report says that they're accommodating more than the stormwater that's being generated. You had an existing deck, they're just expanding it by a small portion. But a lot of that, the stormwater improvements were already put in from the grading permit, as they just noted back in June this year, so.
Okay. Mr. Barron's not here mostly for the last case, but do you have anything to comment
I
on?
would just add, it sounds like to some extent the property slopes, so there's some element of a hardship there in terms of having a rear amenity that's level with the first floor. So in that case, it might make sense to be able to replace the deck that they have.
Okay.
Right, and on V7, which is the same as what you have in front of you, it just shows, I'll go in a little bit, it shows the appearance from the back of this area. And down here, we're planning on putting stone on the exterior of the house in the area where it doesn't currently exist. And then these 4 columns across, and then a nice railing and so on, instead of that sort of lattice wall.
Board members, any questions for Mr. Rosen? Anybody? Going once, going twice, okay. Anybody in
Thank
the
you.
public have any questions for Mr. Rosen? Seeing none? Okay, and he was your only witness, is that correct?
That's correct.
Okay. Anybody in the public want to tell us what they think about this case, pro or con? Again, seeing none. Would you like to say anything in conclusion? You don't need to, it's up to you.
No, just thank you for your time. We really appreciate it.
Okay. Mr. Ball,
So I
conditions?
only have the one condition with compliance with the conditions noted in the board engineer's memorandum, and I assume we're sticking with no other requirements for landscaping.
Sounds good.
That's it for me.
Okay. Who would like to begin our deliberations on this one?
I'll do it.
Okay, go ahead.
I'm inclined to support this application. I think that it's a really beautiful change. I like having the patio open at the bottom and the stonework, so I think that will look nice to any of the neighbors that may see it. But it seems as if, I mean, it's really a pretty modest change to your home and to an existing condition. You do have a hardship because the ground slopes slightly in the back. I think that, I mean, based on the testimony of Mr. Rosen, very few of your neighbors will even notice probably that you added on to this. So I think that it's pretty much like no change in the neighborhood. I like the screening that you did to conform to the forester's recommendations. And this, I happen to like skip laurel, so I think it will look nice. And so for all of those reasons, I'm inclined to support your application.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Anybody else want to add or help us along here? Anybody? Okay. Well, I'll support the application too. I think it's, as has been noted, that slope, we've seen cases like this before where a variance is largely caused by a slope. It's not really adding anything to the house. It's just the way the land happens to flow. Appreciate the efforts to address the stormwater. And again, as been fully illustrated, it's not going to have any negative impact on the neighbors. It's a beautiful neighborhood. This will improve the neighborhood, so I'm inclined to support it too. Okay. Is there a motion to approve?
Motion to approve.
I'll second.
Okay. Mr. Nicola?
Mr. Steiner? Mr. Mullen?
Yes.
Ms. Schwartzstein?
Yes.
Mr. Loikitz?
Yes.
Ms. Toth?
Yes.
Ms. Sager?
Yes.
And Mr. Yuko?
Yes. Okay. Congratulations. Good luck with your project.
Thank you very much.
And Mr. Spur and Dr. Levine are rejoining us. God, one hand is
Anyone want a brief recess while Ms. Alfonso sets up? Monday week now. Yeah, I guess so.
Sure.
Yes? All right, we're going to take a 5-minute recess, let Samantha set up, and then we'll go from there.
Thank you.
And they make you drive.
All right. I want to go home eventually. Okay, take your seats. All right, we are here for the third and final application of the evening, 503 Springfield Avenue Associates LLC, with Ms. Alfonso representing the applicant. Ms. Alfonso, care to
Thank
begin?
you. Good evening, Mr. Chairman, and members of the board. Samantha Alfonso of Dempsey and Sheehan, here on behalf of the applicant, 503 Springfield Ave LLC, through Mark Bedrosian, its managing member. Mark and his family, as many of the board may know, have been running the Bedrosian business across the street from City Hall for over 75 years. They've been in this building since about 1985. Mark will go through it a little bit more. But this application is to improve this existing commercial building with permitted residential units, a 2-bedroom unit on the 3rd floor, a single-bedroom unit on the 2nd floor. The 3rd floor unit is proposed to have an outdoor terrace area for sole access for that 3rd unit, and the 2nd floor will also contain the new office space. So the 1st floor currently contains the office space for the business, and that would be relocated to the 2nd floor. The office on the existing office on the 1st floor is going to be converted to the elevator space and a restroom for the commercial space. To realize these beautiful improvements, which were really designed to be consistent with not just the gateway to the downtown, but with the surrounding properties and the design guidelines of the City of Summit. As the board may have noted, this application was scheduled to be heard in November. As part of reviewing the reports of the board's professionals and agencies, the applicant had a chance to take another look at his plans and make sure that particularly the facade looked the way that he proposed it to, and intended it to be consistent with the neighboring properties and the design guidelines of the ordinance. With that, he has added confirmation that it will be brick facade, substantially similar to what you're looking at on the screen right now, which is the front, if you're looking directly across the street here, directly at the center of the Bedrosian building. One of the notes in the reports was the HPC comment of November 9th, particularly asking for added fenestration and articulation. Due to that comment, we took another look and set some of these windows back a bit. Can't see it so much in this photo, so I will show you. One second, I want to show you the correct rendering here. If you take a look at this rendering, it's a little bit easier to tell on the left side that balcony is significantly set in, right? That is the balcony, the full balcony. That is within the existing facade area, really. Now, the Juliet balconies that are along the rest of that 3rd floor are not true balconies, but they are set in. Those windows have been set in 6 inches or so, and I'll let Seth confirm that, or another expert of ours, but it's about 6 inches, I understand, to add shadowing and detail, relief from the facade. We also added an additional Juliet balcony from the last set of plans, which increased our proposed building coverage to 57.5%, where 57.2% was previously requested, and 56.7% currently exists. In the B zone, only 30% maximum building coverage is permitted, but again, this is a previously existing non-conforming condition. We are merely adding less than 1%. We also require several other variances, and I'd like to go through them now, if I may. The first we are eliminating the variance for the stairway bulkhead. I understand from Krista's comments, she noted that we were really only over less than 1 inch, I believe. So, I'm sorry, 4 inches? 4 inches we were over, and our experts were able to cut that down so that we will comply with the height, and the stairway bulkhead will comply with the height requirement as well. We are adding a variance, however, for the AC units at a setback of less than 25 feet to the rear. That's going to be due to, there is no other location that it can be. However, it will comply with the noise regulations, of course, and we'll show you that further. We will also require a FAR variance for 161.3%, where 75% is permitted. However, 116.3% currently exists. As Krista noted, in the CRBD zone, right next to this property, the permitted FAR is up to 300% where there are residential units above the first floor. The next variance will be for signage. There are 2 variances associated with signage. One is for the location above the first floor, and the second is for the second sign. The first rendering on the screen from straight on looking at the building shows the first sign, and I will show the second rendering now, looking at the property in a westerly direction. And that is the second sign that faces the parking lot, the existing parking lot. There are 2 signs in those locations now,
Yes.
and we are just looking to replace those and improve upon them. Those signs are consistent with the regulations and guidelines for signage. The only variances are for the location above the first floor, and because this second sign that you're looking at now, facing the parking lot, technically does not face the right-of-way or a public parking lot. We also need a variance for light location at 33 feet. Those are for those lights that you're looking at up above the first floor around the Juliet Balconies. They really are for aesthetic purposes. Again, they are noted in the design guidelines as something that the city is looking to have these types of aesthetic pleasing features. The parking variance that is required, there are existing 7 spaces on the site with 1 in the garage. Those spaces are proposed to remain, so there will be 8 total, where 18 is required. Here, we believe, and Mark will go into this further, and the professionals will go into this further, but the real reason this parking has worked for Mr. Bedrosian's business, and it will continue to work. He really has more than enough parking at this time. He believes he will have more than enough parking in the future with this proposed development, and there will be 2 spots for the residential, more than 2 spots, and 1 will be the garage space. We also need a variance for the loading space requirement. Here, Mr. Bedrosian uses a box truck. It's very small. It's not a true truck that requires a larger space for loading, and they have the double doors that it will take up that space during the loading time and unloading time. But as Mr. Bedrosian will discuss further, it does not take nearly as much time as a typical loading procedure for this type of business. There's a variance required for the parking buffer. Minimum 5 feet is required between parking areas and adjacent uses. Here, this is, again, a previously existing non-conforming condition that we are looking to keep. The existing setback of 3.57 feet to the railroad. We require curbing, we're looking to have curbing that is mountable rather than the 6-inch high curb. This is for, I understand, aesthetic purposes, and to allow for safe access. We will require a variance as well for lighting illumination at 1.1 FC at the easterly lot line, where 0.9 at the street is permitted. This is again at the lot line, right next to the rail corridor. It's quite far away from any property with any active property, and it will not impact anyone. These variances are all caused by a combination of the lawfully existing structure on the site, the existing triangular shape of this very small lot at less than 0.2 of an acre, and the hardship that the applicant sees in improving this property consistent with the permitted use in the zone that is residential above the first floor. And with that, I would ask if the board has any questions.
I have one. I may have misheard you. What did you say the current FAR is?
The current FAR is 116.3%.
Okay, I have, some of the plans here say 56.7.
I'm sorry, am I wrong? 56.7? I'm sorry for that. I'm
Okay.
thinking of, my apologies. 116.3% is the previously approved FAR by resolution dated 1998.
Okay.
This application is quite different from that proposed and approved application from 1998 because that application did not propose residential units. Residential units were not, I understand, permitted at the time, and they were not proposed. That application did propose an FAR, however, of 116.3% that was approved, and that was for the additional showroom and storage area, similar to that contemplated here with the enlargement of the showroom and storage space for the business.
But right now it is 56.7?
But right now, yes.
Okay. Thank you.
Further questions from the board for Ms. Alfonso? Okay. Hearing and seeing none, I'll just observe, are there any members of the interested public here for the application this evening? Are you party to the applicants in the back? Okay. So just note that there are no members of the interested public currently in the room. So we'll hear your first witness, Ms. Alfonso.
Thank you. Thank you. And Mr. Bedrosian, I would ask if Mr. Bedrosian could be asked to provide testimony.
If you could please raise your right hand. Do you swear or affirm that the testimony you're about to give in this matter is the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
Yes, I do.
And please state your name, spell your last name.
Mark Bedrosian, Bedrosian.
Thank you.
May I remove my mask?
You may, yes.
Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Bedrosian, you're authorized to speak on behalf of the applicant,
Yes, I am.
and you have brought this application before the board.
Yes, I have.
Can you please explain the existing conditions of the property for the board?
So, it's a unique space. It's been our Oriental Rug Gallery since 1985, when we bought the property from a competitor. It's an unusual business because we work with mostly one client at a time, but we need plenty of inventory and space to show the merchandise. At times when we work with more than one client at a time, it would be where we're working within the client's home, so the rugs are selected by the client or their interior designer, and perhaps one team would go out to the house, and at the same time someone else would be inside the showroom. But inside the gallery, it's usually one client at a time, give them private, independent service. And the issue right now, which is interesting, we've got a very large inventory that we're very proud of that's been built up over actually 3 generations. My grandfather started the business here in Summit in 1924. So we're, January will be 98 years in town. And part of this idea was to launch us into the next century, where my nieces, nephews, and my children want to come into the business. So part of the growth from the business side was to prepare it for, coming decades. What clients really are interested in now is a little bit more space and a little bit more care and attention in the showroom. And with the amount of inventory I have, we don't have enough square footage on the floor to really lay things out and give them the experience they're looking for. So with the additional square footage, we're not really accommodating more clients at a time, like say a supermarket. It's really giving that client more attention, to lay out each individual rug next to each other. So that's why we're very excited about the opportunity to have the space. It's really all about presentation more than increasing, client count.
Thank you. So your proposal also includes the residential units, and could you just describe that a little bit more?
Sure. When I was told that we were allowed to possibly have residential units on the property, it sort of fits in with our business model, or my industry's business model. An unusual business because rugmen really never retire. So my grandfather ran it till he was about 75, and then when he was gone, he put his last day in at the desk and left his inventory to my father. When my father passed away, he worked the day before, and he left my grandfather's inventory and his inventory to my brothers and I. So I really don't anticipate retiring and running off into the sunset. So when I came up with the idea with my design team that we could possibly do an apartment on the 3rd floor for myself to reside, that seemed very exciting. So I could work and reside on the 3rd floor. My mother, who's still alive and worked the business up until about 70 years old, she's 87 now, heard that we had enough room for a 1-bedroom apartment on the 2nd floor. And believe it or not, she's, put her hand in on it, and she's going to be excited to be on the 2nd floor in between our small staff and her 2 remaining sons, which would be my brother and I. So it is an unusual situation, but relatively common for our industry. Most of the gentlemen I still do business with are in their 70s and 80s, and we're still doing strong business on the buy and sell side with our carpets.
And Mark, you designed this really to be consistent with the surrounding neighborhood and Summit in general.
I think it's interesting because I focused on the inside, what I needed to function, but really my design team came up with this absolutely, in my opinion, beautiful building. The whole idea was to make it look like it had been here for the last 70 years. I know City Hall has been here 70 years. I remember when they built it, but we wanted to blend in with City Hall, blend in with the Opera House, and just make it look like it is part of the community for half a century. We didn't want to stick out and look like we were brand new. So we're hoping that we accomplish that.
Great, thank you. Did you have an opportunity to review the board's professional reports?
I did.
Would you agree to them? Excuse me, we wanted to go through a couple of those questions. Mark,
Okay.
would you mind? Chris, Tom, would you like to go through your report, any specific questions with Mark, or do you mind if?
I could wait for we're going to hear from the architect?
Yes,
Okay.
yes.
I might have had a use question or two just to move
That's
things along.
exactly.
Mr. Bedrosian, thank you for coming.
Thank you.
So just had a question in terms of the frequency of deliveries and truck usage, and whether or not the box truck will be stored on site.
The box truck's been on site for about 20 years.
You've kept it there?
Yes. And it goes out to see client deliveries. We'll have an appointment, client will come in, like a rug. They want quick service, so we'll put the rug in the truck, go out to the client, conclude business in that fashion. It's interesting, UPS now takes up to 150 pounds. So we ship out and receive in goods pretty often from UPS, which is, 1 or 2 deliveries a day. It's a very low intense use compared to a lumber yard or anything else where there was constant traffic of vehicles.
And the UPS trucks over the lot typically, or?
Yes, they show up every 2 days and they'll drop off. That's been same situation for the last 20 years or so. When we ship out, we usually use the local UPS store, right next to Starbucks. So we'll drop off towards the end of the day.
I don't know if the board has.
Just curious, it was noted that one of the parking spaces was to include the garage. What vehicle will use the garage?
It most likely be a third floor resident. That should be myself.
For now, it will, right.
Fair enough. Okay, thank you. Any other questions from the board? Okay, and we understand that Mr. Dow or Mr. Variance will have further questions for the expert witnesses.
Of course, of course.
Thank you very much, Mr. Matrosi. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Her So Samantha, we're just going to make note that the presentation you have will be marked A1
Yes.
and you'll submit it to Chris.
Yes,
Thank you very much.
If I may introduce Anthony Pacino, and if I could ask him to be sworn in as a witness.
Do you swear or affirm that the testimony you're about to give in this matter is the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
Yes, I do.
And please state your name, spell your last name.
Sure, it's Anthony Ficino, F-A-C-C-H-I-N-O. I am a senior project manager at Casey and Keller. They reside at 258 Main Street in Millburn. I am a licensed professional engineer. I've had my license from 2003. It is current. I have testified before many boards in Essex and Morris County and have qualified as a professional engineer.
And I assume the answer is yes, but licensed in New Jersey.
In New
correct?
Jersey, yes.
Thank you.
Yep,
Any
we'll-
questions from the board?
No questions, we'll accept your credentials.
Thank you very much.
Ms. Alfonso, yeah.
I'm sorry to be a little redundant because Sam did such a wonderful job with her intro, so some of this information might be already heard. But Sam, could you go to our site plans, which are part of your package? Sheet 2 should be fine. So this is sheet 2 of the site plans, or you know what, why don't we do the aerial? I apologize. Aerial. Why don't we we have an aerial exhibit which shows, it's just an aerial rendition of the property taken from the air map. I don't know the date of the air map. I think it's July of 2021. So, the property is approximately 6,829 square feet. It's a triangular shaped. Is that zooming in? Or no? Oh, there. Yeah, in blue there. It's a triangular shaped lot. It has frontage along Springfield Avenue of approximately 124 linear feet. To our west is the PNC Bank. To the east is the railroad, New Jersey Transit Railroad. And to our south is Springfield Avenue and obviously the town hall. The site is currently developed with one-story retail service facility that sells oriental rugs and carpets. The site is located in the B zone, which is a permitted use in the B zone. The existing parking area adjacent to the building consists of 7 parking spaces, and one is located inside the garage currently. Vehicle access from the site is from Springfield Avenue with a one full movement driveway. The existing lot coverage on the property is currently 87%, where 90% is permitted by ordinance. And the existing floor area ratio is 56.7%, where 75% is permitted by ordinance. Mrs. Alfonso explained that there are some existing nonconformities on the property. The building coverage is currently 56.7%, where 30% is permitted. There's also some other variances regarding the curb height. 6 inches is required by code. We have mountable curb, and just mountable curb is just pitched about 4 inches. I personally think it gives it a lot more aesthetic look and makes really the parking lot look nice. So we hope to be able to keep that mountable curb around the parking lot that's been there for 20 years or so that was testified earlier. There's also a variance for a buffer. Currently, there is a this existing parking area to the railroad side yard requires to be 5 feet. Currently, there's only 3.57 feet. The topography, the parking lot drains towards Springfield Avenue, which Springfield Avenue has a drainage system that collects stormwater that runs off. To the rear of the site, the site just drops off to the railroad tracks, which are considerably lower than our property. And then again, and also the roof leader drains, they drain to the Springfield Avenue drainage system. With regards to utilities, the building is serviced with all public utilities. No existing site improvements are proposed to be removed as part of this application. Okay, I guess now we can go to, I want to refer to the site plans, sheet 2. Maybe you can zoom in on the, it's nice having an assistant. I'm used to this. Okay. Yeah, right. So as stated earlier, we are constructing a 2-story addition to the existing 1-story building. The addition will accommodate the expansion of the showroom area, and also proposed is 1 residential unit on each floor. The ground floor, on the ground floor, the garage will be used solely for the residential unit. One of them, I'm assuming, is going to be the 3rd floor unit. There will be no increase in impervious coverage on the property. A small increase in building coverage is proposed. As shown on the renderings earlier, there are Juliet Balconies located on the 3rd floor. I apologize that my plans originally said we were proposing 57.2%. It's actually 57.5%. Building coverage, so it's going from 56.7 to 57.5.
And Anthony, not to interrupt you, but that increase in building coverage really is related to the Juliet Balconies to begin with, right? All of that increase in building coverage is...
Yes, that's it. The building coverage are due to the Juliet
I'm
Balcony.
sorry, can you repeat that?
As far as,
Difficult to hear.
The building coverage, I asked him, is the building coverage increase due to the Juliet Balconies?
Okay.
And he said yes.
yes. And then the proposed addition of the addition of the 2 floors will increase the floor area ratio from 56.7% to 161.3%, where 75 is proposed. The architect will explain to you, as far as floor plans are concerned, where that number is coming from. So we are seeking a variance from the zoning ordinance, which they'll speak. We also have the planner that will testify to that as well. With regards to parking, the applicant is proposing to keep the existing parking the way it is. I think the parking lot is in very good condition. It consists of the 7 parking spaces and 1 private garage that will be used for the resident. When looking at the parking demand, we felt that this use fits the category of a gallery, even though his use is really a retail use that will have a different requirement. We felt that his use really falls into that gallery category, which requires obviously less parking due to the fact that it's a gallery and it's by appointment only. So the parking.
I forgot to mention this, if I may, in my intro, but we had spoken with Mark Bedrosian about doing a condition of this approval to give the board comfort that this use really is to be maintained as a personal service, right, by appointment, 1 to 2 customers really at a time. If that use were to ever change, the applicant would be happy to come back to the board for a new site plan and an amendment to that approval to deal with the parking. This is really, this parking standard works for this use, and the applicant is more than willing to accept that as a condition of this approval.
how would that work in practice? Well, let's say Mr. Bedrosian, you know, his family decides not to stay in the business and he's going to retire. And then you have basically an encumbrance on this property in perpetuity.
So really, no matter what, unless another user came into this building that was so similar in use that Krista or whoever the zoning officer is at that time felt that this is not a change in use, the applicant would need a certificate from the zoning officer saying, right, that the parking requirement is met with their use as a new user of the property. To get a certificate of occupancy, in other words, that applicant would have to make sure that their use is consistent with this use and the requirement is the same, or they would have to go back to the board for a new parking variance. Here, we're offering to add this as a condition of the approval. It gives the board a little bit extra confirmation, right, in the approval itself. And I think, does that make sense?
I just wonder if this is a discussion. I have a lot of questions around this as well, or at least a lot of thoughts around it. Is this a planning discussion?
It is, but since we're talking about it.
I know we're in the middle of engineer's testimony, so, yeah.
Yeah, we're on the engineering for parking related. I think, you know, much of this application does hinge on parking, the ability of the site to accommodate that. So I think there's two approaches. The applicant is offering this condition, but the board is not obligated to require that condition and may just accept the testimony that the site has sufficient parking because of its proximity to the CRBD, et cetera. Or if they want that, you know, sort of flexibility to have an applicant, a future applicant come back in the future, then you can do as Mrs. Alphonse was suggesting, and the trigger mechanism would be an application for a certificate of occupancy that the zoning officer would get. They would look at the prior resolution and, you know, see if they need more parking or not. And then they'd come back to the board. So.
I mean, I definitely like the sound of this, because obviously some other use, a convenience store there obviously would have a totally different parking need than a carpet store. Andy, or Mr. Wall, would this work, delegating this to the zoning officer to determine what's a comparable use?
Yeah, so, I mean, realistically, as Ms. Alfonso already stated, it's probably going to trigger a site plan application anyway if the business were to change significantly, but this does essentially just add another layer of protection to make explicitly clear that if you find that the parking is suitable for this proposed use, but may not be for some other variation, it would require an additional variance at that point. And that determination, I think, would be appropriately left to the zoning officer to.
Just in terms of the mechanics of it, though, if we were to approve the application with the parking as is proposed today, and the business were to change hands, a new business were to come about, the only permitted use would be what the DRO allows, right, as a permitted or a secondary?
This is actually, correct, right.
Right.
But if you wanted to qualify this as a certain type of use, we would have to wrap our heads around what that actually is.
What are the permitted uses in the B zone? I don't know that off the top of my head.
They're commercial in nature. I think as it applies to this application, it's technically a retail use, but it has a showroom gallery aspect. The primary use is retail, but I think, you know, there is some artistic quality to it. Feel free to elaborate, but it's a retail use with a showroom.
Joe,
The word probably bothers me.
Yeah.
Well,
what about a deed restriction?
Well, if I may, this is Samantha. So that's why we're offering the condition of the approval, right? So 99 times out of 100, or any lawyer helping an applicant with an application to move in a new use to this site is going to have to go to Krista, or whoever the zoning officer would be, and ask, right, do I have zoning permit permission to have this use here with the current parking as is? And of course, I believe Ms. Anderson would say no, as long as it's any other use other than this. Here, right, Krista we spoke with her about this, she wrote in her report, right, she agrees with, based on the understanding of what this business entails, right, the gallery showroom standard makes sense for this particular business, but it would not make sense for another type of business.
The issue here is we're setting up a problem down the road. We have a use with.
What if we change the zoning? Now all of a sudden we say, okay, CRBD needs to expand, we're going to take it down to Morris Avenue. and the zoning changes with the master plan for a new zone that we don't even know about right now. Deed
So,
restriction, make sure that it's done.
That's,
I'm sorry if I may clarify, so even if it's a permitted use, even if a new operator wants to purchase this building, and it's for permitted retail use, any retail use, that's permitted in the zone, they still would need to go to Krista for the certificate of occupancy, and that would include a zoning review for parking.
If the zoning officer misses it, we're stuck. I'm still looking for a
Right, that's
way
why you have
to
the condition of
guarantee-
approval.
See, I'm looking for a guarantee and you can't provide it. We have to provide it.
Yeah, sorry.
No, but I kind of agree with this. We're setting up a problem down the road. We have a site that's deficient in parking for any other use other than a sort of low-traffic retail use. And, all right, down the line, successor owner comes in, wants to have a different use, goes to Krista. She says, you're deficient, you need a variance. Then that future applicant comes here, asks us for a variance for a deficient use, and that future board is left with a choice between, do we allow the proverbial 10 pounds of dirt in the 5-pound bag, or do we have a site right next to City Hall that's going to lie underutilized, I'll put it charitably, for an indefinite period of time. And I think that's the crux of this case, and now we're sort of getting into deliberative stuff, but that's kind of where I'm scratching my head at this condition.
Well, if I may, I recall a few years ago, you also had motorcycles there? Am I remembering correctly? So what was the effect on parking when it was rugs and motorcycles? How did that work?
As a motorcycle owner in the downtown at the time, they weren't renting spaces, I can tell you. I was looking for someone to put a bike. So. But I won't hold that against you, by the way. Go ahead, Mr. Petros.
Thank you. You're correct, the rugs turned into motorcycles for a short amount of time. But the business concept was the same. It was a boutique, a very specialized boutique business, one client at a time. That particular business, most of the business was done by phone or internet, actually. So that some of our best months, we had no clients whatsoever. And vehicles were delivered and shipped. But I feel that the space does lend itself to a boutique specialized business. If rugs were no longer popular, it would definitely go to someone in wall art, and it'd be the same type of concept, or sculpture and wall art.
And Mark, can you tell them, the board, a little bit about your employees' parking situation? They don't park on site, correct?
No one parks on site. They rent spots from the city for $80 a month. Seems to work out just fine. Again, it's a very low impact use. Two of the porters that work with us that open and close the rugs live right on Edgar Street. And most of the young men that have worked with us and handled the rugs live right in Summit, and they walk or take the bus to work.
So you really don't have any employees, and you haven't for some time, I understand, correct, that actually park at the property?
No.
So the cars at the site are really for the 1 or 2 customers who are coming to do business, and you also have 1 or 2 commercial vehicles, correct?
Exactly.
To help move items.
And then the small trucks, which are there, are for visiting the clients in the local area. They pick out a rug, or we select a rug, and we go to someone's home.
Thank you for the clarification.
So with that, really what I'm getting at here is even if, right, yes, this is a specialized business, and that's a big part of why this calculation works, why this parking works here, but also we are extremely close to the train station, a lot of downtown parking, the public parking garage, and Mark has done a really good job in the past and continues to, right, to want to be part of this community, and part of that is having his employees pay for public employee parking.
I'm kind of I'll speak for myself here. I'm okay with holding this discussion of the condition. I think there's merit to it for sure. I'm concerned, without going too deep into deliberations, that this application is so unique and peculiar to the business and the circumstances of the owners. I want to have a broader discussion about the B zone and how this fits within the DRO. And I think to David's point, how we can ensure into perpetuity the fullest use of this site as possible as a kind of a desirable end result of land use. So I don't know if Ms. Alfonso, you want to continue with the engineering testimony? And then we
Yes.
can hear from, you assume you have a planner with you.
We do.
We would
We
love to
do
hear
have a
from him. Tom's on the edge of his seat, so we can have that discussion.
Thank
Yeah, if you'd
you.
like to continue with any further engineering
Thank you,
comments.
yes.
And we understand parking is tied into the planning application, so we'll make sure every angle gets understood fully.
Okay.
Sorry
So-
to interrupt you, Anthony. I think
No,
you were heading towards lighting, naturally.
Yeah, should I put the parking numbers?
Oh, yes.
Yeah, so, based on our approach to the gallery parking requirement, it requires 12.4 parking spaces. As stated, there is a small office space for the use, and that requires 1.3 parking spaces. And lastly, the residential dwelling units generate a parking demand of 4 parking spaces. So ultimately, for this building, we would need 18 parking spaces, where 8 are proposed. You just heard testimony from Mr. Bedrosian, how it's, by appointment only, and, the employees are all pretty much walk to the site or get driven there, and his loading capabilities. We are also, as stated just a few minutes ago, we are in close proximity to mass transit and to the downtown area. So usually that requires less need for parking spaces or cars. So we believe that the existing parking supply is sufficient to support the projected demand. With regards to trash and recycling, the architect will show where it is, but there is a trash and recycling area located inside the garage area. The trash is now picked up by the city, and that's probably going to be a minimum of once a week now that the residents are going to be on the second and third floor. With regards to grading and stormwater, there's no grading proposed at this time. The drainage patterns are not going to be altered at all. And the existing roof area is not changing as far as area. Roof area might actually be better, because most likely on a terrace area, which the architect will explain, will probably be nice planters and provide some form of landscaping. There's no increase in impervious coverage, therefore stormwater management is not applicable here. With regards to landscaping, there's excessive landscaping already exists on the property, as you can see across the street. There are some decorative fences as well as shrubs located along the front as well as the side of the property. The landscaping is a visual interest, and it's well buffered to the train station. Not much more landscaping can be added. The city forester actually had that in his review letter, so no additional landscaping is proposed at this time. With regards to lighting, I guess we can, actually, yeah, it's up there already. Okay, great. That'll work. We are proposing wall-mounted lights to eliminate the parking area. There is a single fixture. This one doesn't show it. We have to go to my site plan, I guess. Oh, the lighting exhibit. Sorry, I apologize. We created based on some comments from the review agencies, we prepared a lighting exhibit to try and clarify where the lights are actually going and for this site. So looking at this exhibit here, I basically broke it down into a first floor plan and a third floor plan. So the plan to the south there, which is zoomed in by Samantha here, shows the wall-mounted fixture. Let's discuss the wall-mounted fixture that's above the garage door, or adjacent to the garage door. That's actually going to be the light that's going to be lighting this parking lot. Currently, as you can see across the street, if, I don't know, if driving in today, you can see that there's actually no lighting in the parking lot. We will obviously need lighting for the parking lot because of the introduction of the residential units, as well as probably providing a little more safety lighting as well. So that light is actually going to do all the work. The other lights that are proposed are labeled B, which are located all along Springfield Avenue, as well as the back where the garage is as well. Those are basically more for aesthetic purposes. Seth, our architect, will show you in the rendering how nice those look. They're carriage lamp lights, and we're proposing, I believe, 6 on the first floor area. Also, we're proposing the carriage lamp lights, so if you can extend up to the 3rd floor level there. Okay, we have a bunch of carriage lamps that are carriage lights that are proposed on the 3rd floor. Samantha is now circling them. There's 10 total. 8 of them will be visible from Springfield Avenue, coming in either direction. And there's 2 of them proposed on the terrace area. On the 3rd floor, and the architect will get into the terrace area, but there is a terrace area on the 3rd floor. Those 2 lights will not be visible once the parapet wall is there. They are located at the back wall, and the parapet walls, which the architect will show, will screen those lights completely 100%. Those lights that are located on the 3rd floor are going to be at a height of approximately 33 feet. By code, we're only allowed to have 15 feet. So we're asking for that variance. Again, it's more for aesthetics. It's really giving you a nice visual look and feel of that historical look of the downtown. The lights are at a appropriate scale for the building, I feel. And the lights, because they have dimmable capabilities now with the new technology, the parking lot light will probably be dimmed to either 50% or whatever is necessary for security purposes, as well as the sconce lights. I'll call them, they're carriage lamps, but I'll call them sconce lights. Those will also be dimmed. And perhaps maybe even motion censored, so when somebody does approach, they will go full illumination and then get reduced again after the hours of, I believe, 10 to 7 a.m., I believe, is the ordinance requirement. Yeah, we'll comply in accordance with 35-14, 1.1M.
So and that's what Mark had mentioned, that's what currently exists there, is 10 to 7, the lights are off?
Yes.
So we can keep that consistent, although that we want to keep any safety lighting on, but dimmed, right?
Yes,
code,
yes,
whichever the code
absolutely.
will require.
Sam, can you zoom into the details? One of our comments were to show you what the lights will look like. The wall-mounted light, which is going to be doing most of the work, is a very small, sleek little wall light, very high-powered, and it really does a good job. Not really going to be that visible because it's not very large in scale. And yes, it's a downward throw. It's dark sky compliant. So we comply with all the rest of the ordinance requirements. With regards to the sconce light or the carriage lamp, we're proposing, historical looking, carriage lamp. We feel that it's, gives it that real nice artistic, nice look.
And this is actually an exception. In the design guidelines, it notes these types of lights, right, as being preferred, even though you can see the light source because it's aesthetically pleasing, consistent with the downtown.
Correct. This light actually, I'm glad you mentioned that. The light source itself, because these are LED, the light source is actually at the bottom of the fixture, and it shoots up into a reflector, and then it projects some light. But these are very low wattage lights. They are not meant to light up the parking lot or anything. They're just really for aesthetic purposes only. And you actually won't be able to see the light source because of the location of it. And we have the ability of using either frosted glass or the textured glass. So it'll look very, very nice. We feel it'll be a nice add-on to the building. Want to move on quickly to utilities. Like I said, the building has existing utilities. Because of the residential, we have to sprinkler the entire building. So we are going to be proposing a new fire line that's going to be tied into the Springfield Avenue existing water system. You want to go to my site plans real quick? Almost there. Want to just touch briefly on generator. We are proposing one to two generators. We haven't sized them yet because of the electrical load, but we believe that 2 generators are going to be required for this building to light different things during an emergency purposes. They will be located on the roof surface. Also on the roof surface, I apologize, it doesn't show here. It'll show up on the architectural drawings. We are proposing 3 air conditioning units as well, also on the roof. The parapet walls that are proposed around the entire 3rd floor will completely screen the units from the public. There will be no way for anyone to see them. They will not protrude any higher than the parapet at all. Basically, there's no way of seeing them. There is a variance regarding the AC units. They are required to be 25 feet set back from a rear yard. I stated earlier, this is a triangular shaped lot, so they really can't comply with that. So we will definitely have a variance for setback of an AC unit. I think that was more intended when the AC units are located on the ground level. When they're located 40 feet up in the air, AC units are really not going to be obtrusive or any issues with noise being at that height. So, but nevertheless, we are requiring a variance for the setback of the AC unit.
And then we need a variance for the buffer, the screening not being within 10 feet of that AC unit, I believe, right?
Yes.
It'll be within 10 feet. Never mind, our architect is saying he is gonna be able to put it within 10 feet.
Okay.
So we will have that.
Okay.
Okay, thank you.
Okay. The generators, bless you. The generators are natural gas, and again, the sizes will be determined. The generators also have their own built-in self-enclosed enclosures, so they do reduce noise. They are tested on a weekly cycle for, I believe, an hour or so. So they will be tested, I want to say, within a weekday and then early afternoon hours. So we can put that as a condition of approval.
I'll just note that the ordinance does require particular hours for.
Oh, they do have, okay, very specific, okay, very good. So we'll comply with that, okay? Just quickly on noise, the units do have a decibel level when they're in the exercise mode of approximately 59 decibels. The state standard for noise control allows no more than 65 decibels at the property line when you're abutting a residential zone. We do not have that situation here, but we will comply anyway because we are going to be more than 23 feet away from the property line from all sides. So we comply with that. Okay, and again, the generators are located 40 feet up in the air. Sound usually goes up, so I don't perceive any issues with noise nuisance from the residential area that's to our east. I'm sorry, to our east. Samantha touched on signage. I guess we could get Seth. Let him. Okay. So I'm pretty much done because Seth will talk about signage.
Thank you. Board like to ask any questions or?
Mr. Gower, we'll start with you. Anything you'd like to draw attention to?
Well, I had questions regarding the projections from in the front of the building on the side, so I don't know if that's better.
The awnings and.
Well, the awnings and the balconies, whether or not they're projecting from the facade, and that's, so I don't know if this is a question for the engineer or the architect.
I think the architect is gonna go through
Okay.
that a bit.
Okay, so, and then the awnings, I mentioned to, Chris and I had a discussion whether or not the awnings would be, require council approval, and I don't believe that they do. I think
As far as I know, they're allowed to encroach.
Okay, so that question's been answered. The lighting, you mentioned about them being on timers and/or dimmers and/or motion sensors. Are we talking about just the one light that is by the garage, or are we talking about all of them all over the building? Because you have a lot of lights on the third floor, you have a number of lights on the first floor.
He's willing to do all of the lights that are not required for safety, right? So that would be, if the building code requires the parking light
Right.
to be on a certain amount, for the residential, they would want to be allowed to do that, of course, right? Otherwise, all lights would go off at 10 PM.
That's correct.
So-
Safety-oriented lights in the parking
Right.
lot.
'Cause I don't know, I have not seen anything on the definition on the carriage lights, what the foot candle level is on them.
It was so low, they told me,
Yeah,
I'll let
yeah,
Anthony answer that
Yeah,
one.
the carriage lamps are really just meant for aesthetics. The smallest bulb is really approximately a 60-watt bulb. It does not really generate a lot of lumens, especially, the ones that are way up high should not generate much at all at the ground level. The ones located around the building, they will light the entrances and give a little bit of a lighting along the building, but I think that's more for safety. You do have a sidewalk there. I think it will be, provide public safety and welfare.
Right, but those would be turned off at 10 o'clock at night.
Those will be shut off, yes, correct. The only light that will be on all the time would be that one light that's gonna be doing all the work, which is over the garage. And obviously, we will need a couple of lights that are at the doorways, I think should always be
But those
lit.
could be dimmed, is
Yeah.
my
Right.
understanding, if that's acceptable.
Okay, and
Mr. Dower, sorry, just on the topic of lighting, given the uniqueness of the property, this isn't a purely residential zone. What is the desired attribute of lighting in this kind of a district? Or maybe, Tom, you have an opinion on this. I mean, is there an additional, do we want more lighting, maybe than less lighting, as is our typical expectation?
I'd say first and foremost, it's about safety and functionality. But you also want to balance that so there's not excessive glare and impact to, the surrounding community. I think in this case, as you pointed out, there aren't any really surrounding residential properties. You have City Hall across the street, PNC Bank. You have residential properties in the rear, but that's the opposite side of where the lights are. And then you have the aesthetic component of lighting in terms of how it looks at night. And I think this site very much is a gateway site, as approaching the CRBD from the west. It has to be viewed in that context. So, based on the applicant's testimony, I think the board has to wrestle with or consider, if the lighting's appropriate, if it should be increased or decreased, or if it's acceptable as is.
So should we use, and we'll maybe have a deeper discussion into the concept of a gateway site, but should we look towards lighting more like the PNC Bank or more like the Opera House?
Personally, I think I would look more toward the CRBD zone as opposed to a standalone, more suburban type development, again, because you're in this transitional area. And I think that would help segue better into CRBD, but that is a subjective opinion.
If anyone has any other questions on lighting, I don't have a great answer for this. We don't see a lot of applications like this that are kind of, proximate to the downtown, not near, single-family homes, for example, where we're oftentimes trying to minimize the impact of light.
I personally just think that you have to be very cognizant of the fact that residents will be coming in here late at night, and their safety has to be paramount consideration.
Are there street lights? I can't remember off the top of my head. Street lights anywhere in the frontage?
I believe there's one by the PNC Bank.
Okay.
We have our photo board. Might show that. I think there's one on the other side of the bridge.
And this is all part of A1 still.
Thank you.
But this is a photo array sheet with existing photos from the site that James Weber of our office took on the 24th of November. It's hard to
I'm
see,
fairly
but
confident there's one in
I
front of the
believe
PNC
there is
Bank.
one. Right
I
by
recently
PNC.
walked from Winberry's to my car parked in this parking lot after dark, and it was a very dark walk.
That is a dark walk.
It was very dark.
Yeah, Mr. Mayor, is it a reasonable expectation to have a private property owner contribute to the lighting conditions, say along that sidewalk frontage?
Technically, they're not supposed to spill lighting all over the property
Right.
because that's a variance. The board can take that, that could be a reason for
We want to
granting a
encourage
variance.
spillage? I mean, that's kind of the
Reverse
question.
spillage,
Yeah.
I mean, that could be a reason for granting a variance.
To improve the public safety condition?
If I could offer, I think one unique lighting aspect of this application is the lighting on the third floor.
Right.
So I think the board could approach it at either just say, no, we're not comfortable with that, yes, we are comfortable with that, or maybe we reserve the right to review the lighting, that when it's developed for 6 months or so, we can say, you know, maybe it needs to be modified further, because it is such an important site.
I like that idea, if the board would be comfortable with that. I think that Mark would be comfortable with that idea as well.
And that actually leads into the question I have, both about the lighting variances and the signage variances. And I don't know if the engineer or the architect or planner who's the right person to answer this, but what is the need, or what is the reasoning for having the height variances for the light and the signage? So maybe this kind of gets into that as well. I don't know, if you want to answer it, let someone else answer it.
I mean, there are light,
And we were just mentioning, right, the third floor lights though are really meant for the aesthetic of the carriage light itself. It's not for the light, right? So potentially we could even agree to keep those lights off. But it may look uneven. So I would like to talk to our experts about that idea before I just give that away here. But the idea is, right, it's not giving off a lot of light. It's not for the light. It's for the way that it looks in detailing the building.
We'll hear more from the architect
Yes.
on that
Yeah,
point.
so my interest there is the height of the lights too, not just
Right.
whether they're on or off, but the height variance and the sign height variance too.
Okay. Thank you.
So just to totally beat this to death, is it appropriate to ask for a lighting plan? I feel like the lighting that's included, and perhaps I'm reading a little bit too far into Ms. Alfonso's comments, is principally for aesthetic purposes, with the exception of the light over the garage, for example, which really is focused on safety. The lighting that's proposed is not intended to actually improve the visual conditions for navigating the site by either a member of the public or an occupant for commercial or residential reasons. So is there a lighting plan that's appropriate here, or?
We have a plan, and a plan typically shows the locations and the light spillage, for lack of a better, or dispersal. I think what you're talking about is more of a rendering, like a nighttime rendering. What does this look like? You know, it comes at a cost, of course, and you know, I don't know if the board needs that information, but I think it would be more of a rendering situation than a plan.
I guess I don't understand, I'll speak in the absence of anyone else speaking, I don't understand what the lighting is intended to accomplish. I believe it's principally aesthetic,
That's what I'm hearing also.
and I just want to make sure, maybe from you, Tom, and maybe from you, is that, do we need the lighting to do anything more for us?
I mean, you have the parking area, so there are engineering standards that as long as there's enough lighting to illuminate that area from a safety and functionality standpoint, then it meets compliance in that regard. And everything else is just icing on the cake, and it's, you know, a matter of subjective taste.
The other question would be whether or not there's any building in the downtown area that has lighting up that high.
Right.
Whether it's a coach light, aesthetic lighting, we don't allow up lighting, so that's not the case.
Is this similar to like landscape lighting where somebody might uplight a tree or, you know, something like that? Very low voltage, very low lumens, it's not obnoxious, it doesn't spill over, but it highlights beautiful architecture or whatever. I mean, is that what we're talking about here?
Yes, but I do want to let Mr. Lieb, our architect, talk because he is mentioning, he just came over to let me know that at least one of those lights on the third floor are actually required by code. So I want to let him talk a little bit about that.
Okay, So that may be a logical transition to the architectural testimony.
Thank
Any
you.
other questions on engineering, though, while we have the engineer here? All right, wonderful.
Thank you very much.
And I'll note again for the people watching on television, there are no members of the interested public in attendance tonight. If they were here, we would offer them the opportunity to ask questions.
Thank you. Mr. Lee, I would ask if Mr. Lee could be sworn in to give testimony as a witness.
If you could please raise your right hand. Do you swear or affirm the testimony you're about to give in this matter is the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
I do.
And please state your name, spell your last name.
Sure, it's Seth A. Lieb, L-E-E-B as in boy. It's Seth A. Lieb, Architect, AIA.
Thank you, and can you briefly describe your background, experience, and 3 boards
Sure.
you've appeared
I've been
before?
licensed to practice architecture in the state of New Jersey since 1995. I've had my practice since 1998. I have testified before this board on several occasions. I have also testified in, I think, over 80 municipalities in New Jersey on over, I don't know, 150, 200 applications. I'm located at 1719 Route 10 East in Parsippany, New Jersey, Suite 100.
Thank you. Any questions from the board, or would you like to accept his credentials?
We'll accept your credentials and look forward to hearing from you. We've been talking about architecture for a little bit here, so we would welcome your expert testimony.
Thank you. I'm just going to warn you, I may switch from my glasses. I have 2 pairs of glasses. It's a sign of old age, so I apologize.
No problem. Seth, could you please go through, I understand you had an opportunity to review the reports of the board's professionals and agencies, and I wanted to particularly to go through the board's questions first, if we could.
Okay, so as your planner stated, this is a very important site. It's really the gateway into downtown coming from the west. And it is a unique property, triangular as mentioned before, unique building on the property. And because of that, we had an opportunity here. We have an existing 1-story building where we're putting a 2-story addition on it. And we wanted to actually redo the whole facade so that it could be one building as if it always existed here, that it wasn't just an addition on a building that may have been built, whether nice or not. We really wanted to make it fit in. And that's very important in my practice and with many of my clients in working in downtown areas and also in historic neighborhoods. So what we've proposed is we've reviewed the downtown design guidelines, and we feel what we've proposed, and I'm going to walk you through it, are very consistent and compatible with the downtown, and I'll go through exactly.
Well, if we could, I think that there were a couple of specific questions at this point, right?
Okay, I
In
will
particular,
go over that first.
Unless the board wants us to go through the specifics of the floor plans and everything.
Just want to get out here at a reasonable hour, so whatever you think's doing most.
Very good.
Okay, I will hit the bulleted points.
Yeah, I appreciate it though.
Okay.
Very much appreciate it. If you could please describe the lighting, right?
Okay.
And the code.
Okay, so as Anthony spoke, we're putting one light fixture, which is the shielded fixture that will be mounted above the garage to illuminate the parking lot. The other fixtures, which are carriage lights, or lanterns, as I like to call them, are more historically looking, to fit in with the downtown and fit in with the DRO guidelines and character. There are, as there was a question, there are at least 2 other buildings that I know of without assessing all the buildings downtown that do have lights up high. One in particular, I believe it's the Roots building, has carriage-type lights or lighting up above the first floor. Now, we are proposing it at 33 feet, but that particular height is specific to where it relates to on the facade in relationship to the windows and doors that are on there. So we talked about that there's these Juliet balconies. And so I'm going to take this one. I see it up there, a little old-fashioned. I'm going to use this. So the Juliet Balconies that we're referring to, there's one long one here and one here, okay? Protrudes from the building. Hence, that's how it got the name of a Juliet Balcony from. And so, but these doors right here actually open to the space, okay? And so, although the idea is that we would put a little pot, like a planter here, a planter here, a planter here, and a planter here, you could open it. The intention is not to actually walk out there, but that you could open it for ventilation. You also could, as Mr. Bedrosian said, being this is the residence up here, looking downtown is really a nice view. And looking this way, looking the other way, looking west is also a nice view. So we wanted to capture that. By having the Juliet Balconies, rather than having it flush, gives the facade a little bit more three-dimensionality. We didn't want to expand the footprint. We didn't want to build out over and create even more FAR. We just wanted to go up and make it architecturally fit within the building, with also in the town, but also within its own facade. So by having that little bit of dimension, it breaks it up so that the railing actually wraps forward, wraps down, and wraps back. How does this relate to the lighting? Well, required by code, whenever you have an exit, wherever you have an entrance or exit from a building, you do need lighting. It's a safety measure, whether you can actually go out or not. And that's true really for a Juliet balcony, okay? So along this facade here, it is not Juliet Balconies, nor is it along this facade, okay? As talked about earlier, this is actually recessed in. It's recessed in a little over about 3 feet, okay? And this requires, this will open up. This opens up to the living area of the residence, okay? So that it can provide light and air into the residence. This as well is recessed 3 feet. It has not a balcony, but it has the railing from brick to brick, okay? That's for 2 purposes. 1, obviously for safety, 2, for aesthetics. We like the look of this. We wanted to bring that consistency, but also bring a little bit more three-dimensionality to this facade and it not just be a blank facade. So this window here is actually set back about 6.5 inches, plus or minus, plus the frame. And so again, the railing here goes brick to brick. Same with these. The railing goes brick to brick. It's set back, it's about 6 or 7 inches back to allow it, but so it maintains a kind of architectural consistency. The idea of this building is, unlike in the downtown, when you have an infill between buildings, this is on the gateway there, but it's an object building, so it's seen in the round, okay? And being that it's seen in the round, it was our intention that it be viewed in the round and that architecturally it was consistent in the round. So it wasn't just a front, and it's not just, you know, well, let's put it that it's not just the front. You see it from the different sides, that you will see the brick. Some of the architectural feature, I'm sorry.
No, it's okay. It was very hard for you, it was very hard for us to understand, right, to make these renderings look consistent with what's actually real in the field, right, because of that view.
Yes, so we did, as you can see, 3 different renderings, one coming towards town, one in the courtyard, and one head-on as if you were standing across the street. But I just wanted to talk about a couple. So going back to the lighting, because that's where we started, and I don't want to, I get a little hung up with the architectural, so I apologize. But the lighting is not necessary here. It's not necessary. It's not required by code. It is required along the side. The intention was that it created a consistency so that it, an architectural consistency, we often say it kind of fakes the eye. So it makes it look like they're balconies, but it's not really a balcony, okay? The idea...
There's a light here, the garage light we keep talking about is actually right here, right?
I'm going to show you on this drawing. Give me 1 second. Here. So this drawing is in your packet. It's actually V1. You can see that light. It didn't appear my mistake, it didn't appear in the renderings. But it's that slimline light fixture that's shielded, it's located right there. Okay, that's the one that provides all of the lighting for the parking lot. Now, I want to just mention something which is very important that's come to my attention, talking about codes. This is also in your packet. Actually, it'd be easier if I do it from rendering. Okay, in the rendering. So over here you have a set of doors. As talked about earlier, this is, as it exists today, there's a little, I'm going to call it corral outside that's fenced in for the garbage. Now all the refuse is going to be inside. Now if you look at the floor plan, it's a nice use of that little triangular area. It's a good use. You can't really put anything else there, but all the garbage and refuse will be kept in that area. But because it is a door to the exterior, it needs some lighting required. Okay? Does it need two? No, but it would look unbalanced if it was only one. Over by this door, which is the door into the lobby, that's required to have a light. Then we have the lights in front. So what's been brought to my attention, this door, this light and this light will not provide enough light for this door.
Which door is that?
So this is the entrance off the parking lot. The main entrance is off the street where the man is in his gray jacket. But where the circle is, that's the entrance that you could enter. More likely you might enter in this door, but you could enter in that door from the parking lot. Most likely you would enter in the door here. That double door is really used for the porters to bring the carpets in and out, okay? It would be adjacent to the parking space. By code, it does need a light fixture. This, we would need one or two, I would probably propose two there, that are not shown on the plans.
Maybe, sorry, just to pause for a second, Mr. Lee, and to connect this back to an earlier point about conditioning the application on a specific use. If the use were to change, would lighting be an item that could be reviewed and amended by the board? If, for example, it would require more active use for differing hours, would that be typically part of like a zoning review?
I mean, if they had to come back for a site plan amendment or application, everything's, becomes open. So, but it would only be if they were changing the lighting or the hours. Otherwise, the lighting, I presume, would stay the same as.
The only light that I would think that would really need, if there was a requirement for a motion sensor, would be this one, because that's the residential entrance. So if a couple or a single or somebody is downtown having dinner, they come back in December, and maybe it's past 10 o'clock, you'd want the light for safety to come on. So that would be the only one that I would think would be an absolute requirement by code. But obviously, whatever requirements you'd like, we can go with.
I want to ask a question about the lights, or maybe clarify the record.
Sure.
So the zoning office report calls out all 8 of those carriage lights as needing a variance, and you're representing
So I'm
only
going to
4 of them. So assuming we get there to prove this at some point, do we need to clarify the record, the zoning officer's report, just to make sure that she's on the same page as Mr. Lieb?
Mr. Lee, are you saying there's 8 on the 3rd floor? Is that what we're?
There are
Right.
1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8.
And you're representing that the 4 facing
wait.
the downtown are required?
No. These.
Those 4, they're
These
facing the
4
downtown
are
area.
required, yes, facing the courtyard. I like,
Okay,
but facing the downtown are required by code.
Right.
They're required unless, for whatever reason, this board came back and said, no, you can't have doors that open.
So maybe just to help us
And there's
move this
also
case
2
along.
more lights.
Right.
There's 2 more lights.
So I just want to be clear from the board that what I want to do is just kind of bifurcate the lighting. So
Okay.
there's the 33 feet up in the air, that's kind of one
Right.
set of questions. And then there's anything ground level, code compliance, all of that. Is there any concerns about the ground level lighting, motion sensors over the garage, any of that? Okay, so that's fine. So
Okay.
let's talk about what's
Okay.
up high.
So
right?
there's 2 more lights. Again, if you look at the plan, I can bring up the plan, but if the floor plan is B3. If you look at V3 in the upper, show you. Here, the outdoor terrace. There are 2 doors that exit here, besides the functionality. By code, we would need a fixture here and a fixture here. As indicated on the engineer's revised drawing, or his lighting plan, there are 2 light fixtures that would be there. As he discussed, and I will discuss, this is an 8-foot-high parapet wall along the terrace. The lights are at about 6 feet, plus or minus. It is cut off, so the light can't even spill towards the railroad tracks. Along this facade,
And that's along Springfield.
that's Springfield Avenue, but it's set back over the garage. Try and bring up the drawing here.
But are those 2 lights, Ms. Alfonso, part of the variance that's being requested? They're not considered to be 33 feet
No,
high, right?
they're not.
Okay. Does anyone have any questions or objections to those 2 lights?
It's just the one.
Okay, so back to the 8 lights. Okay,
Back
sorry,
to
we're
the
just
8
trying to.
lights.
Yeah.
So 4 of them
Are there any lights on those Juliet things on the western, or the westerly side of the building?
So on this,
Yes.
no, there's not proposed any carriage lamps. In here, there would be just 2 to 3 soffit, very
Do they
low,
need
low-level
variances?
soffit lights.
Do they need variances?
They're actually in the ceiling. I don't think so.
Okay.
Sorry, you were jumping out of your seat. Go, Tom.
Well, just one point of clarity, we're talking about the 8 lights, and we're talking about lights. There's another 3rd-story Juliet balcony that faces the
Yes,
market. That
that's a
not-
fixed window. It's a fixed window, so it doesn't open.
For balance, though?
Um,
Because
I
it resembles a balcony, should it have?
So, it's a very good question. My thought process was, I mean, obviously we're talking about right here. So my thought process was it wasn't necessary. We had enough lighting to achieve the goal architecturally of the look, even though it is a Juliet balcony. Could we put it? Yes, but it would be instead of 8, 10 lights for the variance.
Okay, so now we're focused on these 8 lights. My only question architecturally is, for buildings that are of a certain height that isn't necessarily consistent with the surrounding buildings, oftentimes you see architectural design that insets top floors, right? That seeks to minimize the visual impact of the height of this figurement structure. By adding these lights, does this exacerbate the height and
No.
presence of
In
the
my
building?
professional opinion, it's an accent. It's an accent. It won't exacerbate it, won't diminish it. But what it does do, both during the daytime, it's not just a nighttime thing, because when you look at the fixtures, it can be a black wrought iron light. It actually adds visual interest and breaks up the brick and breaks up the facade. So, and it creates a rhythm that you often see in downtowns, and especially in Summit. You see a rhythm downtown of whether it's the fenestration or the first floor windows or the lighting. So it creates a rhythm there, and I don't believe from my professional viewpoint that it's going to detract. I think it's actually going to add to it both when it's on and when it's off.
And then just remind us, these are on timers? What is the
Yeah, so
code?
the current lights on the site are on timers, and they go off at 10 p.m. and they go on at 7 a.m. And he's willing to keep that timing for the new proposed lights.
For the carriage lights as well?
Yes,
Okay,
yes.
all right.
And just keep the minimum safety lighting for the parking area, understanding the 1 residential door rate.
Any members of the board have questions regarding these 8 lights?
I have a question. I understand why you put them on the top floor because of the Juliet balconies, and I understand visually. Did you, and I don't know if it would make a difference to anyone, but did you consider putting them on the 2nd floor instead of the 3rd floor?
So again, a little bit, so I'm going to talk about, I didn't see another example of this in Summit. Have I seen it architecturally? Yes, I have seen, in a vertical type where you would put the lighting here. However, in this particular case, what I've done is line up the lighting. So now if we put it here and here, wouldn't have the same, it'll break it up a little bit. These are shielded a little bit by the awnings, and these are consistent with the windows that align. By putting it here now, it's a little different. It has a different feel to it. That's my opinion from an aesthetic standpoint. Obviously, there can be other opinions.
I just want to ask, can any of our professionals here confirm, and I don't doubt Mr. Lee, but that, just on our side of the issue, is he in fact correct that those lights are required for those Juliet balconies facing the downtown or facing the courtyard, as he put it?
That would be a building code requirement, that I'm not, to be honest, I'm not familiar with that. This is the first time I'm hearing it. Again, not to, he knows more than I
Right,
do. about
so it's
building.
not a function of the Juliet balcony, just so it's clear. It's a function that if a door opens.
Okay, well, yeah.
Any passage that it opens, then it is definitely a code requirement.
So I'm just looking for confirmation. Again, I'm sure you're correct, 99% sure. I just want to know, because it contradicts a little bit what
That's
ours
correct. Kristen and I actually had a conversation about that. So they are required to have lighting. To what extent, I'm not positive, but they're required to have it when a door opens up.
Okay.
And in this case, the doors open in. It doesn't matter whether the doors open in or open out.
But
That
if we were
isn't
to
the issue.
exclude this lighting, you'd need to close those,
They
eliminate the
could
Juliet
never open.
balconies.
They could never
Right,
open.
They could never open.
Yes.
Just to clarify, for purposes of the code, a door opening to certain injury or death, if you were to exit it, is considered a door for code purposes?
If it opens and you can walk
You know,
out, if
so-
it's 6 inches or whatever it
I
is.
feel like I'm gonna be writing about
but-
Juliet balconies next year's annual report, but anyways.
So I would like to address that, and I understand your concern. First of all, the balconies, the railings all meet code, obviously, for their height, but it's a bedroom. There has to be a point of egress. God forbid there's a fire up there, even though there's a sprinkler system. If a fire truck comes, and a ladder has to come in and rescue someone, that's, it's a safety issue. It's a health, safety, welfare issue.
So you would, just to clarify this point, I think we can put it to rest, is the Juliet balconies are desirable aesthetic elements. There is a public safety benefit to it.
Yes.
And in order to allow the Juliet balconies to be constructed, you need lighting. And the lighting happens to be 33 feet up on the building. That requires the variance.
I just want to
Go ahead.
clarify, it's
Yeah, of
not
course.
the
That's what you're
Juliet
here for.
balcony, it's the door.
The door, sure.
Okay?
Sure.
You can have a Juliet balcony
Right.
without a door.
Right. But we
Okay.
want a door.
Yes.
The windows, right, are to the floor.
Yes.
So that makes it
Yes.
door.
Yes.
Yes.
Anything that's a
Yes.
means of egress, let's put.
Yes.
Yeah.
Right.
But the doors have to open in order for there to be an egress
That is
to
correct.
code, to the fire code.
Absolutely.
That's correct.
And it will open.
So
Yes.
you need you need a light.
You need a light.
Is there spillage from these lights into the apartment?
Is there spillage what?
From these lights into the apartment that the resident may say, I don't want this glare in here, how do I turn it off?
Hence the shades.
Okay, you're talking about, okay.
Those are not gonna have much light though,
No,
right? Is the
no,
point
I
is
mean,
you can't-
I give the example on my own house in South Orange. The lights are on a timer, and they're on all night up into a certain point, and they kick off. And does it keep me awake at night? No.
Again, your choice,
Okay.
not the
Okay.
tenants.
Thank you. Thank you for taking us through that lighting journey.
Okay.
I feel like we ended in a good place.
Okay, I'm gonna do signage next.
Signage would be great.
Okay.
Thank you.
So as it was testified, we're doing 2 Bedrosian signs. 2 exist today at approximately the exact same height. These are actually probably a little bit lower, okay? There's a little bit more facade above the windows. What's not evident from the rendering, and it's also not clear in the drawings, these windows here go up to the ceiling. They go up to just under the awning here, okay? So this is literally, there's floor structure here and a little bit of wall. There's no room to put the sign anywhere else, other than putting the sign on the awning, which I don't think is it's not appropriate. What we're gonna do with this signage, similar to what it is today, except that it's gonna be pin lettering, and it's gonna be backlit with a halo effect. I don't know if you're familiar with that, what that is. There's other examples of it downtown. But So each of the letters are gonna have a little glow so that they illuminate at night. And we're going for, as mentioned, the two variances. One is the height, and one is, I believe, the second location, correct?
Correct.
So to have it facing the parking lot, parking area, and facing downtown. But they're gonna be exactly the same.
And I believe, if you'll recall, maybe West Elm and Berkshire Hathaway, I believe, have the pin lettering with the halo lighting behind them.
I think West Elm, Berkshire Hathaway, doesn't ring a bell in my head.
So just
They're pretty much the same.
to break this variance apart, the one regarding the one element of it regarding the signage not facing a right-of-way is a reflection, is it fair to say it's a reflection of the uniqueness of the lot and the
Yes.
orientation of the building?
Yes, I mean, you're coming, as you come down from downtown, it's, you know, the road actually curves a little. So, you know, you can identify it, especially if you got past the building, that's the only time you would see the sign, you would miss the parking lot.
Right.
So this way, it's an identifier that, for you to come in if you were given directions or GPS or whatever.
And then the first element of the request of the variance regarding position above the first floor
Right.
is kind of because of what window height and the awning.
That is correct.
and what have you.
It's, there's no other place to put the sign.
Okay. Any questions from the board on these two signage points?
You said that currently there is signage in those two locations now. I know that the building is only one story, right? That's where the signage is
Yes.
now? And it's similar, right?
It's
It looks
similar, yes.
But,
We can
Yeah.
bring up a picture.
yeah, that'd be great. Thank you.
I drive by that building so often, I forget what the signs look like now.
I know. They are smaller, right? They
Right.
look a little bit smaller,
They are a little smaller.
but it is the pin lettering, just no lighting, right?
But that is correct. In actuality, the sign is going to be a little lower than that.
So do you know what what the letter height is of those signs?
If you zoom
Because
in. If you zoom in.
I'm just gonna say,
Uh,
when I look at the, I like it, it looks really nice, it looks big.
It does look bigger when I see the illustrations now, so
Yeah.
I'm curious.
Sure, it's actually only 36 square feet for each sign.
Yes.
If you could kind of explain what that is, really.
So, give me 1 second.
I do, I will note that the board on other occasions has asked for signage to be made smaller, and I do think because this is a gateway thing, the gateway building, I mean, we don't want, personally, I wouldn't want to see it be too large.
No, of course not. I believe that we are actually under the size maximum for signage.
We're very far under.
Okay.
The sign maximum is 117.75 square feet, and each sign is 36 square feet, so we're at 72.
And how big is each
And
letter? How tall is the
Each
letter?
letter is approximately 4 feet.
High.
Yes.
That's pretty big.
4 feet
No.
tall?
So it's about 42, it's about 42 inches. It's about 42 inches plus or
Okay,
minus.
the plans say 2 feet high.
2 feet, so
and
I'm
18
sorry.
wide.
If that's what it says, I apologize. It's 2 feet high.
Let's confirm that, whatever.
If you give me 1 second.
Switch your glasses, Mr. Lee.
It's definitely 36 square feet each.
I'm sorry, I had the wrong scale. It's 2 feet. It's 18 feet by 2 feet. I apologize. I was looking at the wrong scale on my
So, if I could ask a question, because you're asking for 2 variances for signage, if the board finds that it's slightly too large, what's the lowest sign height you would accept?
So one of the things that it's hard to tell from the rendering, but it's not, so this is not a sign in a traditional, it's the individual letters. So there's I'm gonna call it a thinness to the letters. These are not thick like a thick font. This is a very thin letter. So if it gets much smaller, it's gonna get smaller in both directions, and it will actually be difficult to read. The difference there is it's black on white. This is gonna be black on brick. It's a very different contrast, and you need it, from a visual standpoint, you need a little bit higher depth or height to visually read it.
So just so I'm clear, I think I heard you say that the proposed block of letters is 18 by 2 feet?
Yes.
What is that block now, the size of the letter?
I don't know off the top of my head.
Okay, so
It's probably in my notes somewhere, but I don't know it off the top of my head.
I'd just like to have an idea if it's much bigger than what's there now, or close to the same?
It is bigger, so I'll tell you right now. Can you bring this?
Which one?
No, I need to see it a little closer.
It doesn't go any further than that.
Okay, can you bring back up the existing photo? Actually, you can bring it up here, the existing photo.
Does the illumination require a variance in and of itself?
Zoom in a little bit more.
We permit that for the city.
Oh, it doesn't work that way. Oh, it's gotta catch up, all right? You think it's gonna catch up?
We understand that the existing height of the sign, which is very blurry in this picture now, but it's 14 inches in height currently.
Versus the proposed, which is 24 inches, so it's 10
Yes.
inches higher, and lengthwise?
And so this sign, that one, not the front one, but that one is, based on the width of the doors, it's about 6 feet wide, that sign.
Okay, so the proposed sign is significantly bigger.
It's significantly
But,
longer.
there's no variance needed for the size in it?
That's right.
Okay.
It's really, the variance is for the height and for the second sign.
And the height is actually a little bit lower in the proposed sign,
It
is that
is.
what you said?
The height is a little lower.
Okay.
So,
Up,
I may really
oh, there,
quickly,
that's
I
good.
have a picture that I honestly took on my way here this evening, just because I saw that it looked similar to what we're proposing here for the signage. It's for the shade store. It is the same as the Berkshire Hathaway type of lighting. They are black pin letters with the lights behind them. And at night, right, like you see here, I'm kind of a little bit to the left. I'm not directly looking straight on at the sign, and it gives it this dimension.
It gives it a 3D look.
Correct, this 3D
The
look,
shadow.
right, all around. When you're looking straight on at the sign, it's a little bit less,
You
there's
can't
a little
read it
bit-
as much.
You can't read it as much if, it's much smaller than that, I think. I think this is probably the smallest that you could do with this type of signage.
It's very attractive signage. Do we see that in the B zone or just in the CRVD zone?
That's a good question that I can't answer off the top of my head. I'd have to take a look at that one.
So Sam, I'm getting a request from Chris that this be submitted to be marked as A2.
Of course, yeah. This one might be separate from our.
And
So
before,
we do this as A2, because this is a little different, sure.
before we get too far astray, I know Tom asked the quick question of, is there any possibility of reducing the sign as a proposal, if that's what the board would consider?
If I could have a minute. He could reduce the sign. He said that he would agree to reduce the sign.
agree to reduce the sign.
So let me ask the board, would the board find it amenable for the sign
Can
to
I,
be reduced?
can I see
Catherine,
a
got little bit
picture
that vibe.
of, again, of the rendering with the sign, just in terms of scale?
I would want it probably smaller. I mean,
Yeah.
I think we've done this before with other, with other places where we, you know, we have a certain look in the downtown. I think it's really lovely. I like it a lot. We kind of try to keep signs a little bit smaller.
So I think 18 inches would be,
Seth, can you pass the exhibit? The folks can see it up close.
You're talking about meeting in the middle?
I was
and
gonna
that's
say,
right.
so
And I think 18 inches is about there, that's about halfway in the middle, right?
I think if it's much lower than 18 inches, you're not going to
Yeah.
be able to read it.
I'd be
What'll
happy-
happen, when letters compress, the halo spreads, and it becomes a blur, and you just can't read it.
Yeah, I like that, I mean, 18 inches is bigger than what's there now, but smaller than, yeah. I'd be happy with that.
So do you think 18 inches is gonna be large enough to allow for that, for the halo to not merge like that?
When you deal with lettering, there's something, not to get too technical, but there's something called kerning and everything. So what happens is, Samantha asked about, is it going to blur or whatever? If it goes down to 18 inches, it's not going to proportionally reduce in the same direction in the length, because we have to space it slightly different so it works, okay? So it is going to be less than 36 square feet, but that's not really the issue. I understand it's the size is the issue. I think the 18 inches can definitely work, but what it may mean is proportionally, it will not be the 18 feet, but it's not going to be, let's just say, 12 feet. It might be somewhere in between there. I don't know without figuring it out and working with a sign company.
Is that a condition, Andy, to reduce the sign height to 18 inches and then allow for appropriate spacing for however we want to say it?
Yep.
Yeah, okay. Okay, signage, check.
So I want to just go over another thing that came up was the mechanical equipment. Okay? I think, yeah, so if you go to B5, okay? So in the far left is a rooftop plan, okay? As Anthony, I'm actually going to, hopefully you can hear me, I'll speak a little louder, is here's a property line, here's a property line, and here's a property line. Because of that, if you were to take 25 feet, the only area that the AC units could be is on the ground, in the parking lot, which we're not going to do, or right here where the elevator, penthouse, and the generators are. The idea was to keep it towards the back here, within 10 feet of the parapet wall, and the parapet wall would act as the screening, okay? And then on top of the parapet wall, we have railing and other components to further screen. You won't be able to see the AC. It will be contained. It's impossible to comply with that 25 feet. And as it exists today, there are AC units on the roof.
Will the movement of those AC units address any negative visual impact or noise that may be generated from them?
No. As earlier testified, and I'm not an expert in this, noise goes up. So by having, and our parapet is not a thin, I'm going to call it mesh or fence. It's actually pretty deep. So it offers a pretty solid buffer and to prevent it, okay? In terms of the generators, that we did keep 25 feet off that property line. Again, based on early preliminary calculations, we think we need to, and those generators actually have to sit up a little off the roof, but they're going to be screened by the parapet and railing. And then, yeah.
So I just want to make sure, we would agree to a condition, of course, or we would expect a condition that all of these units would comply with the noise ordinance, especially, and make sure that there is no spillage of noise.
I just want to be, just for purpose of the testimony, we're clear that the location of the air conditioning condensers as well as generator units will meaningfully address any visual impact or noise issues.
Yes.
At least to the degree that they would be if they were positioned on the ground. If not, maybe improved, I would
They
argue.
will definitely be improved. If they were on the ground, you're limited to, you have to, it's limited, and you can see it to someone. You will, from the angle from the street, unless you're flying a drone, you're never going to see it.
Okay. Okay. Any questions about the screening for the AC units or the generators? No. Okay. Working hard tonight, Mr. Lee. You're doing a good job.
Thank you.
All right.
Tough board.
Any other question? Any other architectural discussion you'd like to offer? Okay.
No.
Hang back, and we'll call you forward with any other questions.
Okay.
I have a question.
Oh, Catherine's got one. Sorry, she's one.
All right, I'm just going to ask this, and I realize that the testimony tonight has been that the parking is adequate currently for the use of the building and the intended use, but would it have been possible to squeeze in any more parking spaces?
We did look into this, okay? And one thing that isn't necessarily clear, but actually Mark could attest to this, when we calculate parking spaces, it's a certain size. We actually can fit 2 cars in that garage, but not 2 as per, we're talking, it could be a Mini Cooper, it could be a sports car, and it could be a Range Rover, or it could be whatever. And those were just a big SUV and a little car. But by what the requirements are in the town, and by the standards for engineering, only 1 space is allowed in there. So we also looked at some, is there opportunity? It would require more impervious to try and double load a parking space. We felt the green space that was to the right of the property was important, not only from a visual standpoint, but just it's better to have less pavement and more permeable surfaces, okay? And he does, if you can go outside and see, he does have it nicely landscaped. He's got a very nice fence in front with a low fence with some plantings. So we did look at alternatives. We had a lot of discussions about parking, and every time I've ever come to his business, there's maybe one, and I come at all different times of day, there's maybe one customer inside. And it's truly what he says it is. It's 1 or 2 customers, they're by appointment. If you go inside it, you will see the amount of stock in there, of carpets, and this extra space really does mean a lot to show them. And, we're doing an oversized elevator so we can get the stock up and down from level to level. It's very important, and you can see it really shows the stock very well. This is really a beautiful gallery with beautiful rugs.
I just think this is an appropriate pivot to the planning testimony, which we want to address the question of the condition and condition the application on a use restriction. So, Tom,
I
what's
want to
happening?
make that transition too. There are a few architectural questions that I have.
Okay.
These are specific ordinance requirements. I think you did a great job with the aside from other issues we're dealing with, but section 35-14.5 has certain architectural requirements for mixed use and
Yes.
non-residential development.
Yes.
So going to 35-14.5 C2 talks about horizontal articulation.
That's correct.
Which you have, but it requires it between the 1st and 2nd floor versus the 2nd and 3rd floor, which is the way it's shown.
Right, so I can explain that. Excellent question. So, like a typical, or it should be a typical building, it has a base, a middle, and a top. But we talked about having that belt course. We actually made it bigger with time since the last round of renderings. And it's actually gotten taller and bigger to delineate it. But the feeling was that the first 2, unlike some structures, it's I'll call it one use on the 1st floor and a different use on the upper floors. And oftentimes that delineation helps to define and show the difference of those 2 uses. In this particular case, although there is an apartment on the 2nd floor, it's hidden in the back, okay? And it's really the showroom gallery. And so I wanted the first 2 floors to read together, and then the 3rd floor to be separate. I understand that's what was written. This is how I felt we could adapt it by having the belt course up higher and tie a little bit better. And I think it also helps to transition if you look at the type of windows or doors on the 3rd floor compared to the 2nd floor. The 2nd floor are bigger windows and more gallery windows. The 3rd floor gets a little smaller, and that's typical in architectural buildings. It gets smaller as it goes up, and that actually helps to exacerbate the perspective, so it looks like it's getting smaller and smaller as it goes up.
And so do you think that the awnings and the signage provide that type of articulation as well?
They do. So we, by having at 18 inches, the smaller sign, it helps to also delineate the betweenness of those 2 spaces. The awnings help to break up the scale. So although it's not a horizontal all the way around, and along this facade, we can't put awnings. We'll be on the next property, so we could only do it here. But along here, we did decide to do it and continue that datum around. So it does break it up horizontally without it being a belt course per se.
So I hear the explanation. We do have it in the ordinance because I believe it's the way it is generally, particularly throughout the CRVD, is that you have the belt course between the first and second floor. So there is some, I guess the goal is to promote some level of continuity throughout Summit. Again, I hear your justifications. So the board would have to consider whether or not this is a better design alternative versus what's required.
Variance, Andy?
No, because it's not in that zone. Yeah. Like separation.
It's the way it was structured, all variances.
Sorry, Tom, just to clarify,
This is-
that's a requirement in the B zone?
Right, so this goes back to section 35-14.5, section A of which says, the following design criteria shall be required for all mixed-use and non-residential development in all zones excluding the Gateway 1, Gateway 2, Prod, and Prod 2 zones. So yes, it does apply.
Thank you.
And not to belabor, there are a few other design criteria that I'm not sure are fully addressed, so I hate to, prolong this, but you might have to tick them off. The next one would be the vertical articulation.
So I've read through your guidelines very thoroughly, and I saw about the vertical articulation. So rather, we looked at an early on design of doing pilasters. Oh, it didn't come back to me.
Which one do you need?
The head on. Yeah, this.
Yes.
Okay, so we did look at doing pilasters along here, because that would create that vertical articulation. It goes on to say about 30 feet across, and there's some other parameters that we have met. We haven't met that necessary,
If I could just, I
vertical.
think it would pertain more in this case to the westerly and northerly facades. I think you've got it on the southerly and easterly. It's a matter of, does it matter on the, essentially the left side and the rear
So,
facades? Maybe it doesn't. It's just
in
a
the
requirement.
rear, you're talking a very narrow, very small portion, and then along the train track facade. So you have I'll call it the cutoff triangle. The back, it's very narrow, there's not enough to do any vertical. But I understand the rationale behind it, but I think it's not necessary. I think, I understand the reasoning, but I think we've refined it so that it's not necessary to have that vertical. You have a vertical separation here, implied corner, it lines up. You have other articulating elements.
Mr. Lieb, if you were to conform with that requirement, just dumb
So,
it down for me, what would it mean?
What it would
What would you
mean?
do?
What could we do?
What would you recommend doing if we really twisted your arm on this one?
So you could, I would not do coining because it wouldn't be appropriate.
What's that?
Coining is when it's a square brick that it's about 5 courses, it sets in, pops out. It's not the right architecture for this building. I think the only, and I wouldn't want to introduce, I'm gonna call it a more cement limestone. What I would try to do is more subtle, and maybe if we could just pop the brick 2 inches to have a little bit of a shadow, to go vertically here and vertically here. But the problem with that is there's just not that enough, you don't want it to just be on a facade. You want it to wrap around, and because of, it would crowd this, it would crowd it here. So it works along the one facade, but it doesn't work along the other. And it really, this, like I mentioned earlier, really works in the round. And so it's gotta really work on all facades.
If I could just follow up with,
Yeah, you started.
I don't want to mess with your design. I was thinking more along the lines of that angular wall that's sort of blank, and whether or not that's visible from the adjacent residential property, so they're not looking at an expansive blank wall.
Okay.
Make it a little more interesting, if need be.
The angle,
Whatever.
right, so
That's what the ordinance requires, so.
we could look at doing something along that wall, along the wall that is the back of the garage, the back of the terrace, the one that goes alongside the railroad tracks, that long expanse. We could look at some type of articulating to delineate a verticality to it.
How many more of these things you got for us? Any more architectural?
One is a cool roof requirement.
Oh, I didn't talk about that. I apologize.
You comply,
So we are gonna do, okay, we comply with that, sorry.
Thank you.
Finally, the last comment, and I'll shut up, is having the front door being recessed where it abuts the right of way, the sidewalk.
So we have it recessed. The front door is
It's
recessed,
resolved.
and it follows the guidelines.
Perfect.
Well done, thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, so there's open question of the band and the vertical articulation. I'm also watching the clock and understanding that a hired board isn't often the most productive board. It's my understanding, Chris and I are passing back and forth notes here, that unless you would object, Ms. Alfonso, is my opinion that it may be best to carry this to a January 19th meeting, with the understanding that we would hear the planning testimony, any further comments or questions from the board, and I think with a high degree of confidence be able to conclude the application. And this may provide you as well, Mr. Lee, the opportunity to consult with the applicant regarding the banding and the vertical articulation. We may need a little refresh of that at the end. I don't know if there's a strong opinion from the board on that. I don't want to mislead you that you put too many more hours into that.
That would be acceptable, as I think that,
Okay.
we would like to come back and answer those questions as well.
Okay.
The 19th is a Wednesday?
Yes. That- That's acceptable, the 19th?
Yes, thank you.
And you'll waive the time with which the board has to have?
Of course.
Excellent. Okay, so what do we need? Chris? A motion?
Need a motion, so moved.
Carry without further notice, all right. Joe already jumped on it, so you got your first there. Do we have a second?
Second.
Tom, I'm gonna get the second. Voice vote in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Thank you very much.
Thank you very much.
Yeah, for sure, thank you. All right, let's move on to resolutions.
Okay, 3 resolutions, all same voting members for each. So first is 260 Kent Place Boulevard. Eligible voting members are Mr. Yuko, Mr. Steiner, Mr. Mullen, Ms. Toth, and Chairman Spur. We need a motion to approve that.
Moved. Second.
All right, Mr. Yuko,
Yes.
Mr. Steiner, Mr. Mullen,
Yes.
Ms. Toth,
Yes.
and Chairman Spur.
Yes.
All right, same voting members. The next resolution is 9 Rotary Lane.
Second.
All right.
Finally getting it.
Mr. Yuko,
Yes.
Mr. Steiner, Mr. Mullen,
Yes.
Ms. Toth,
Yes.
and Chairman Spur.
Yes.
And the last one is 14 Linden Place.
Moved.
A second?
Someone second it?
Nobody wants to
Second,
second it?
second.
Tom.
There we go.
Thank you.
All right, Mr. Yuko,
Yes.
Mr. Steiner, Mr. Mullen,
Yes.
Ms. Toth,
Yes.
and Chairman Spur.
Yes.
And one set of minutes from November the 1st to approve.
So moved.
Second.
All right, all in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Seeing none.
Okay, and before you run out the door, our annual report, the longest I've seen to date. I dipped into 17th and 18th century French architecture on the porte cochere, so I hope you all appreciated that. Were there any other questions or comments, anything else?
Yeah.
No?
Just a
Excellent.
comment.
Yes.
A lot of good work went into this, more comprehensive than an annual report I've seen the entire time I've been on the board.
For sure.
Congratulations to those of you who worked on it, and I move it to adopt.
Excellent. Good, Joe. Do we have a second?
Second.
Claire? All right. Do you need a roll call, or do you need a?
Yeah, I think we should do a roll call for this, just to be safe. Chairman Spur?
Yes.
Mr. Yuko?
Yes.
Mr. Steiner?
Yes.
Mr. Mullen?
Yes.
Ms. Schwartzstein?
Yes.
Mr. Loikitz?
Yes.
Ms. Toth?
Yes.
Ms. Sager?
Yes.
And Dr. Levine.
Yes.
All right.
Thank you, everyone. Don't throw away your packet for 503 Springfield. That will return again. Otherwise, we are adjourned to December 21st.